Hunter x Hunter, start with the prison power. Chapter 61. The sword light passed through the grey rock python's head, and flew diagonally into the sky, cutting off countless branches that covered the sky. After issuing the sword light, Lean jumped sideways in the air and bypassed the python tail that was sweeping towards him. Until the grey rock python's attack failed and his python head was completely split into two. Seeing this decapitated grey rock python, Lean did not relax. An enemy who is not dead, even if he only has his last breath, means that the opponent has the possibility of coming back. With a cautious attitude, Lean watched from the sidelines as he watched the grey rock python's continuously twisting body. After a long time, Lean saw that the grey rock python had stopped twisting. The surrounding land was soaked in the python's blood, and it looked like it was dead. Moving cautiously near the body of the grey rock python, Lean tried to put the grey rock python into the storage room. It wasn't until the grey rock python's body disappeared that Lean relaxed his vigilance a little. Just when Lean was about to continue collecting the giant frog, the grey rock python's head used the snake letter as a support point to eject and fly towards Lean. Looking at the grey rock python with its big mouth open and two fangs exposed, Lean, who had been on guard for a long time, looked indifferent. Roll. With a secret thought in his mind, Lean jumped up at an angle as the python head approached, and kicked the python head far away with a swing of his leg. Seeing the grey rock python's disappearing head, Lean sighed and said to himself, "This kick of 20 years of skill is worth it in your life." Putting away the giant frog lying nearby, Lean knew that he had to leave here as soon as possible. The blood of the grey rock python was very fishy and would attract other creatures. However, after Lean's battle with the grey rock python, he discovered that these creatures only have extremely strong vitality, and their intelligence mostly relies on instinct, and they do not possess special lethality. Thinking of this, Lean decided to sit back and wait for the ingredients to come to his door. If he couldn't fight, it would be too late to run away. If you can't escape, then hide in prison and continue studying for a while. In short, you will definitely make money this time. After making up his mind, Lean jumped onto a big tree and used the leaves to cover his body. Although the grey rock python can detect Lean through heat sensing, not all creatures have this organ. Moreover, when Lean observed the grey rock python, he could clearly feel that according to the rules of this area, giant creatures simply look down on the meat of small creatures. This is why there were small animals moving when he came into this area. Lean was hiding in the tree, lurking among the green leaves. Only then did he feel like a real hunter. Not long after, there was a shaking in the surrounding trees, and a green caterpillar passed through the trees and appeared in Lean's sight. What a big caterpillar! The moment he saw the caterpillar, Lean was surprised by the caterpillar. Although it was only about 10 meters long, it was less than half the length of the grey rock python. But he was as fat as a pig, squirming slowly, and even looked a little cute. It doesn't look like it has any appetite at all. And this is a herbivore, right? He didn't understand why this caterpillar was attracted, but Lean didn't care about him. After all, he really wasn't interested in this kind of creature, even if it was high-grade food. The caterpillar slowly walked to a piece of snake blood and spit out a white thread from its mouth. The moment the white silk thread fell to the ground, it was dyed bright red by the python's blood, and Lean knew from the worm's constantly wriggling mouth that it was sucking the blood of the grey rock python. A vegetarian animal actually drank blood, and in such a special way, which completely broke Lean's understanding. However, Lean thought that this was a hunter world, so he was not surprised. Before Lean could observe for long, there was a trampling sound from the ground. Following the sound, a wild boar with spikes all over its body and sharp tusks in its mouth charged towards him. Being chased. The moment he saw the wild boar, Lean thought it was attracted by the blood of the grey rock python, but when he saw the wounds on his body, he instantly changed his mind. The running wild boar was a little panicked, but when it saw the blood-sucking caterpillar, it changed its direction slightly and prepared to leave farther away from the caterpillar. Just as the wild boar ran close to the caterpillar and was about to rush over, the caterpillar sprayed out a large piece of white thread from its mouth, covering the running wild boar. The white silk thread seems to be elastic, and no matter how wild boars collide in it, the thread will not break. Slowly, the wild boar's struggle became smaller and smaller, turning the silk thread wrapped around him completely red. The giant caterpillar also gave up sucking the blood of the oak on the ground. It shot a thread from its mouth and connected it with the bloody red thread wrapping the wild boar. It continued to squirm and suck in the blood. I didn't expect that it looks so weak, but its methods are so weird. You really can't underestimate any creature. Lin was dumbfounded by what the giant caterpillar was doing, and at the same time he was constantly alerting himself secretly. After a while, the giant caterpillar seemed to have eaten and drank enough, and slowly moved its body to prepare to leave. Looking at the moving body of the caterpillar, Lin felt that there was little point in waiting any longer, so he prepared to continue exploring deeper after the caterpillar left. At this time, a green creature appeared in Lin's sight. The moment he saw this creature, Lin completely gave up his plan to leave because the target appeared. Lin didn't recognize this cyan creature, and it looks strange. Compared with the animals in the previous life, it looks a bit like a peacock, but its front limbs have a pair of very sharp claws, and its tail has no feathers, but is covered with blue feathers. Because he had not seen any information about this creature, Lin decided to name this creature Blue Bird. The moment he saw Kinkei's claws, Lin knew why the wild boar creature fled. It was obvious that the wild boar was Kinkei's hunting target. And Kinkei was not attracted here by the smell of blood, but he came here after chasing the wild boar. The moment the green bird appeared, its eyes were fixed on the wriggling green insect in front of it. It threw a black object high, opened its mouth and swallowed it into its mouth, and then ran towards the green insect. Not only did Lin recognize the object that the green sparrow had eaten just now, but he had also been surrounded by it some time ago. It was the black poisonous insect from the previous area. At this moment, Lin finally knew why there were no poisonous insects in this area. In addition to the fact that there were no poisonous weeds growing here, there were also similar natural enemies. The reason why the blue bird came here with poisonous insects in its mouth was obviously to catch the mouse. First, the wild boar's energy is exhausted, and finally it ends easily, and the poisonous insects in its mouth are just the appetizer. While Lin was analyzing the situation, Kinkei had already caught up with the moving caterpillar. Judging from his fierce attack, it was obvious that this plump caterpillar was more in line with its appetite than the spiky wild boar. The blue bird quickly approached the green insect, its sharp front claws raised high, ready to launch a charged attack at any time. Chapter 62. The moment the crawling caterpillar saw the green sparrow, it obviously accelerated its movement speed, but its physical condition did not support it. Facing the green bird's approach, the caterpillar spit out a large amount of silk threads and tried to wrap up the green bird. Seeing the white threads spurting out, Kinkei was not afraid at all, and instead of slowing down, he increased his speed. Seeing that the silk thread was about to wrap up the green bird, two claw strikes formed across in an instant, cutting off the flying silk thread instantly. Seeing that the sprayed threads were ineffective, the caterpillars seemed to know that they could not escape, so they went crazy and sprayed out more white filaments, trying to use the number as an advantage to produce an effect. At this time, the caterpillar's attack method seemed to Lin to be in a desperate struggle. Sure enough, as Lin expected, all the threads were cut off by Kinkei. Seeing this scene, Lin knew that the caterpillar had no chance to resist, so he prepared to sneak over. The moment the caterpillar was killed, a aureole appeared behind it. Seeing that the green bird was almost in front of him, the green bird's fleshy body trembled, as if recalling something terrible. A moment of hesitation and fear is the biggest mistake between life and death. The caterpillar lost its last chance to fight to the death. In the caterpillar's fearful eyes, a pair of claws emitting cold light came down on it. At this moment, the caterpillar seemed to see the tragic deaths of many of its kind in its memory. The next second, the caterpillar also felt the pain of the same kind, and its fat body completely softened. The moment Kinkei retracted his claws, Lin, who had already circled nearby, quickly jumped out with Wuxian in hand, and slashed Kinkei head-on. However, things went against expectations. Kinkei reacted in time and held Wusheng with both claws. However, Lin's unprepared knife made it respond hastily. Its legs could not bear Lin's force and it knelt on the ground. Seeing this situation, Lin raised his eyebrows slightly and kicked out the green bird, sending it flying several meters away. What Lin didn't expect was that Kinkei actually stood up straight in the air, and finally stood firm after his feet plowed several meters of traces on the ground. Kinkei's movements made Lin realize that this strange creature must be a species with rich combat experience. Those movements were made entirely by instinct. Without hesitation, Lin waved Wusheng in his hand repeatedly, and the sword light flew towards Kinkei. Seeing the sword light flying towards him, Kinkei instinctively felt the danger, and while sprinting towards Lin, he avoided the sword light. Just when Kinkei dodged one of the sword rays, the sword lock on Wusheng flew towards him, making him unable to dodge in the air. Clang! The sound of gold and iron clashing appeared, the sharp claws collided with the knife and locks, and the power of the claw strikes was even greater, causing the chains to bounce off. Just when King K was about to fall to the ground to fight back, it discovered that Lin, who was just in front, had disappeared. Just when it was about to turn back, it was greeted by a cold blade. The moment the sword fell, King K's head flew high, with a look of disbelief in his eyes. But with his wisdom, it is difficult to understand Lin's plan. From the moment it was kicked away, it was destined to face such a result. This is the limitation of the wisdom of ferocious beasts compared with humans. Lin's plan is very simple. The sword light blocks King K's movement, the sword lock attracts King K's attention, and he quietly hides Lin's steps. The sword that ultimately determines the outcome has actually been struck unknowingly. Looking at the body of King K, Lin was very interested in this powerful creature with an unknown species, and immediately decided to make it his lunch meal. Putting away the green bird's body, Lin picked up the branches scattered around and walked in the direction of the green bird. In fact, Lin has been very concerned about the white threads spit out by the caterpillars since he watched them fight. Now that the battle is over, it is time to satisfy his curiosity. Using a branch to fiddle with the caterpillar's thread, Lin found that the thread was very soft and had many sharp and tiny spikes. In an instant, Lin understood why the wild boar was bleeding after it struggled to break free after being wrapped. After studying the silk thread, Lin looked at the limp body of the caterpillar and thought to himself, even if this creature is sold, no one will buy it, right? As a result, in the spirit of mosquito meat being meat, Lin put the caterpillars into the storage room and prepared to end the fishing trip and find a safe place to enjoy the meal he had just caught. After walking a certain distance, Lin felt that it was almost done, so he took out King K's body and began to process it. While handling King K's body, Lin felt more and more that the structure of this creature was very similar to the chicken in his previous life, and he couldn't help but think of a famous dish. Beggar's chicken. But what troubles Lin is that he doesn't have lotus leaves or lois on hand now. After closing his eyes and thinking for a while, Lin decided to use other materials instead and make a simplified version. Taking out the materials from the storage room, Lin used spices to give the processed green bird a full body massage. Looking at the green bird covered in spices, Lin joked in his heart, "My massage is not cheap, don't let me down." Then, Lin dug a big pit and started to light a fire in it. Until the wood in the pit burned into charcoal, Lin counted the time, took out the tin foil, wrapped the pickled green bird and placed it on the charcoal. After filling the hole with soil, Lin packed up his tools and waited quietly. About 2 hours later, Lin peeled off the warm soil and took out the dishes wrapped in tin foil. The time to witness the miracle begins. With anticipation in his heart, Lin removed the tinfoil layer by layer with his hands. As the tinfoil was removed layer by layer, the aroma of the dishes slowly wafted out along with the heat. In an instant, Lin moved his index fingers and accelerated the peeling. The last layer of tinfoil was peeled off, a large amount of hot air spurted out, and a strong aroma exploded in Lin's mind like an explosion. In an instant, a large amount of saliva unconsciously formed in Lin's mouth, and it flowed down the corners of his mouth uncontrollably. The steam dissipated with the wind, and a golden-colored, oil-filled delicacy that constantly exuded a rich fragrance appeared in front of Lin's eyes. He didn't have time to admire his craftsmanship. When he smelled the fragrance, Lin couldn't control his appetite. Now that the delicious food was in front of him, he stretched out his hand and grabbed it towards the thigh of the delicious food. Suddenly, Lin heard a subtle swaying sound in the grass around him. Retracting his outstretched hand in an instant, Lin assumed a fighting posture the moment he summoned Wu Sheng. Lin glanced warily, and saw a girl with pink hair about 50 meters away from him, drooling at the corner of her mouth, staring at the dishes in front of Lin with an extremely greedy look. Chapter 63. Looking at the girl in front of him warily, Lin felt that she looked familiar for a moment, and for a moment he couldn't remember the identity of the other person. As the girl gradually approached, Lin finally remembered the girl's identity. She was the examiner of the second hunter exam in the original work, the gourmet hunter Menkai. At this time, Menkai was different from the image in the original work. Her pink hair hung naturally and was not rolled up, which caused Lin not to recognize it for a moment. "This. Can you share some with me?" Menkai swallowed and pointed at the delicious food in front of Lin. There was no one else in his eyes. Hearing Menkai's inquiry, Lin was naturally a little reluctant. First of all, he had no friendship with Menkai. Secondly, he finally caught the green bird in front of him. In the huge forest, it was not certain whether he would be able to encounter the second one. In this regard, Lin's answer to Menkai was simple: just stay silent. Looking at the silent Lin, Menkai smelled the fragrance of the food, and the urgency in her heart was like an ant scratching her heart. For a gourmet hunter, there is no pain more painful than being unable to enjoy the delicious food in front of you, especially Menkai who is one of the best. I can exchange information about this forest, just give me a little bit. The impatient Menchi offered the most useful price at the moment. Although she was not sure whether the young man in front of her would agree, this was a way to clarify the other party's attitude. Hearing this, Lin thought for a moment and realized that he simply couldn't refuse Menkai's conditions. In this Tommy forest, there are countless good things, but they are considered yours only when you find them. Finding them only proves that there is no fate. As for Menkai, an extremely professional food hunter with an extremely picky personality, she must have a purpose for coming to this dangerous forest. The purpose of food hunters is to find and make delicious food. Lin cannot guarantee whether what Menkai is looking for is valuable, but it must be rare and precious ingredients. After some analysis of the pros and cons, Lin divided the delicacy into 2 parts and reluctantly handed the fragrant delicacy to Menkai. The moment she saw Lin hand over the delicious food, Menkai's eyes shone brightly. After taking it into her hand, she couldn't wait to taste it. Rin on the side was not slow at all. He tore off King K's thigh. The moment he took a bite, a large amount of meat juice exploded in his mouth. At this moment, Lin didn't have any thoughts in his mind. He kept biting the pieces of meat into his mouth, with a trace of obsession in his eyes. Menkai on the other side was in the same situation as Lin, eating the food in his hands with a happy look on his face. When the 2 of them finished eating, they both closed their eyes and savored the final aftertaste of the food in their mouths. When they opened their eyes again, there was a trace of regret, reluctance, and other emotions in their eyes. Cough. When Lin reacted, he pretended to cough, attracting Menkai's attention. Seeing Menkai react, Lin pointed at his throat and waved his hand to indicate that he couldn't speak. Of course Menkai understood this simple sign language and knew that it was time for her to hand over the information. Opening his backpack, Menkai took out a notebook and threw it directly into Lin's arms, explaining, "This is the information I traded from the official website of the Hunter Association before I came here. It contains some ingredients for Tommy Forest." Information. Opening the information given by Menkai, Lin looked at it carefully. Many of the species had specific locations. One of the ingredients called artery fruit attracted his attention. This fruit is very awkward among them. Other species have various introductions, approximate locations, and other information, but this fruit only has a name. Picking up the notebook, Lin pointed out the name of the artery fruit to Menkai and asked for information about this fruit. Menkai took a look and explained, "This fruit is one of the experience information released by my idol, the legendary food hunter, Audiobook when he was young. The name of this fruit was only mentioned above. Specifically, I do not know either." Lin nodded, understanding what Menkai meant and the purpose of Menkai coming to Tommy's forest. The 2 of them had basically the same purpose, they both came to Tommy's forest to look for ingredients, but Lin was completely following fate, while Menkai was more purposeful. After listening to Menkai's explanation, Lin became interested in the artery fruit. Audiobook is a legendary hunter who went to the Dark Continent with Nitro. The things she can record are certainly extraordinary, and the difficulty of obtaining them will certainly not be easy. After collecting the traded items, Lin didn't want to have anything to do with Menkai, so he stood up and prepared to continue his journey. "Wait. Are you a food hunter?" When Lin was about to leave, Menkai stopped Lin, but her expression was slightly unnatural. Hearing Menkai's question, Lin stopped, shook his head in denial and looked at Menkai with questioning eyes. He really didn't understand what this woman wanted to do? "No. What a pity. With such good skills, I thought you were a food hunter." Menkai's tone was a little disappointed. She didn't expect that someone with such good skills was not a gourmet hunter. Ignoring Menkai, Lin turned and left, and his figure gradually disappeared from Menkai's sight. Looking at Lin's disappearing back, he murmured, "You are such a cold person. It's rare to meet someone, why don't you talk to me? Unfortunately, I just forgot to ask for the recipe of that dish." After leaving, Lin was thinking about the contents of the notebook in his mind. The location information recorded on it was very vague, so he didn't need to think about it. What is really important is the information on those rare creatures. Knowing the information about these creatures will help Lin distinguish the characteristics of the beasts, their rarity levels, and the species that may appear around them. Continuing to move deeper, the appearance of King K previously gave Lin a big surprise, and he was very much looking forward to what he would gain next. Until sunset, Lin didn't encounter any living creatures except for a few fruit trees with strange fruits. Seeing that it was getting late, Lin was not ready to move on, so he thought of returning to the prison. The next day, Lin stretched out after getting up. He slept very sweetly this time, and it was a rare sleep. After eating green bird meat yesterday, a warm current flowed back and forth in his body. Although it was not obvious, it was very comfortable. After returning to the prison and reading for a while, Lin felt inexplicably tired and lay down directly on the blanket and fell asleep. Rubbing his eyes that were dry from sleep, Lin felt the state of his body and found that his overall body quality had improved to a higher level. Sensing the condition of his body, Lin guessed that the cell energy must have been squeezed out of his body when he broke through, which was why he felt so tired yesterday. Chapter 64. Suddenly, Lin seemed to have thought of something, and murmured involuntarily, "I wonder if improving one's physique will increase one's lifespan." The sudden sound startled Lin, and he immediately realized that it was his vocal cords that had recovered. After trying a few words, Lin was satisfied with the sound of his recovered voice. The current sound has a magnetic and gentle feeling, which is completely different from the slightly childish sound before. With joy, Lin called for the data panel and took a look at his lifespan. Sure enough, improving your physique will also increase your lifespan. The panel clearly showed that Lin's remaining lifespan had increased from 77 years to 87 years, a full 10 years increase. After 10 years of life, Lin felt very happy. After cleaning up briefly, he realized that he was very hungry. He planned to go to the outside world to see the situation first, and then make some food. The forest was the same as when Lin entered the prison. It seemed to have been the same for thousands of years, with lush branches and leaves still blocking the sun. Looking at the pieces of meat rolling in the pot, Lin swallowed his saliva and kept turning the spatula in his hand. After taking a bite of the cooked meat, the meat was soft and silky, and the soup was thick and melted in your mouth. Lin nodded with satisfaction, took out a piece of bread from the storage room, and started eating. After eating the food in the pot, Lin was ready to pack up his tools and continue walking deeper into the forest. Suddenly, a burst of rapid and chaotic sounds came from the distance, which immediately attracted Lin's attention. Just when Lin was about to check it out quietly, Menkai with long pink hair appeared in Lin's sight. Lin saw Menkai running, and Menkai naturally saw Lin standing in front. The moment Menkai, who was running, saw Lin, there was a trace of panic in his eyes, and he shouted, "Run! There is a monster!" The moment he heard the sound, Lin knew that Menkai must have done something and was being chased by a monster. Ignoring Menkai who was getting closer, Lin was not going to meddle in this nosy business and was going to go back to prison and come out after a while. Just when Lin was about to take action, he saw the monster chasing behind Menkai. This is the first time Lin has seen a creature like Warcraft since he came to the hunter world. The creature in front of me resembles a humanoid, but its body is wrapped in a thick layer of fur, and its head looks a bit like a deer. After being slightly startled, Lin blinked, and he could clearly see in his eyes that the chasing monster had a sin value on it. Although the number of sin points is very small, since the Eye of Judgment can see it, it proves that these monsters can be caught and imprisoned. When Lin was stunned, Menkai, who was running, was also approaching at a high speed. Looking at Lin who was standing motionless, he started shouting non-stop. "You guy, didn't you hear what I said? There are monsters. Run! Are you deaf?" Looking at Menkai who kept shouting to him, Lin smiled slightly, stretched out his hand and grabbed it in the air, and Wu Shang appeared in his hand instantly. This is the manifestation system. Is he ready to fight? Seeing Lin pull out a long knife from the air, Menkai was a little surprised and couldn't figure out what was going on in Lin's mind. Soon Menkai ran to Lin and shouted anxiously, "What are you thinking about? Are you deaf? Run away!" Listening to Menkai's roar, Lin picked out his ears and stared at the chasing monster. 5. 2 of them have sin points. Although they don't add up to much, the life essence is also a good thing. After observing the chasing monsters, Lin whispered to Menkai, "You run behind me, and I will chat with these monsters." "Are you a fool? These guys are no worse than people with telekinesis, and you still want to chat?" After listening to Lin's words, Menkai felt that he was really unlucky. How could he meet such a person, who was obviously very skilled in craftsmanship, but was actually a big fool? But this guy has a really nice voice. In her heart, Menkai complained a lot in an instant, but this sentence came out of nowhere. With a slap on the forehead, Menkai felt like she was going crazy. How could she still be in the mood to think about this when she was clearly facing a chase? Looking at the monster that had stopped chasing, Menkai revealed a kitchen knife and assumed a fighting stance. Seeing this scene, Lin felt a little strange and asked, "Why didn't you run away?" "Escape? I originally caused the trouble myself. Although you are actively involved now, I am not the kind of irresponsible person." Menkai's voice was very energetic, but in Lin's opinion, it was somewhat pretending to be calm. After thinking about it, Menkai was of the materialization type, and Lin almost understood that this was because of the other person's personality, which was somewhat neurotic. And this neurotic factor is a unique willfulness in Menkai. "That's it. You run away. I don't need you to be responsible." After casually replying to Menkai, Lin slowly walked towards the monster. Suddenly, Lin stopped and continued, "If you don't want to run away, just wait here. I'll ask you something after we talk." Menkai was furious when she heard Lin's words, but a powerful enemy was right in front of her eyes. She had no choice but to grit her teeth and look at Lin's back fiercely. The monster saw that there was one more prey, and the fleeing prey was also ready to resist. They exchanged a few words in a low voice in a language that Lin could not understand. Then, with ferocious glints in their eyes, these monsters rushed toward Lin, who was slowly approaching. Menkai has just said that the abilities of these monsters are no worse than those with telekinesis abilities. The message of this sentence, in Lin's opinion, is that these monsters do not have mental abilities, but only have weird physical strength and methods. Physical strength aside, Lin was confident that after improving his physique, he might not be any worse than these monsters. As for the weird methods, you can only use them at the time. If it doesn't work, just collect intelligence and study them thoroughly before killing these monsters. Looking at the charging warcraft, Lin changed his pace and rushed towards the warcraft at high speed. This scene fell into Menkai's eyes, and his expression gradually became anxious. Before sprinting, Lin had already determined the target. He first used all his strength to kill the three that had no sin value, and dealt with the remaining two slowly. The two sides continued to approach at extremely high speeds. In an instant, a large amount of mental energy erupted from Lin's body, and he swung a sword and flew towards one of the monsters. The monster running at a high speed is very flexible. The moment it saw the sword light flying out, it had already adjusted its position to avoid the path of the sword light. Seeing this situation, a smile of success appeared on Lin's lips. The sword light flew near the monster, and suddenly disintegrated into countless tiny sword lights, shrouding the monster. Chapter 65. The moment the sword light decomposed, several monsters knew that they could not escape from such a close distance, and fell into defense one after another. Boom! A large piece of sword light fell, and the monster bulged its body muscles, protected its head and other vital parts with its arms, and used its thick fur to block the damage of the sword light. After releasing a sword light, Lin already knew that these reduced power sword lights would not cause much damage to the monster. The purpose of this is just to block the opponent's attack and attract the attention of Warcraft. While the monsters were guarding their vital points against the sword, Lin had already approached with great speed and launched an attack while one of the monsters was defending. He swiped the sword across the monster's body and cut it in half. To deal with these monsters whose body structure is different from humans, Lin has only two options for attacking: cutting off the opponent's head or cutting off the opponent's body. Those attacks that cannot kill with one hit, in a one-to-many situation, will cause loopholes for Lin and put him in a situation of being besieged. For more. As soon as his mind moved, Lin's attack continued, and a mental bullet that condensed a large amount of mental energy was already formed in his hand while moving. The moment the thought bomb was released, the sword lock at the end of the long knife extended out, forming a cross attack with the thought bomb. After these monsters defended themselves against the sword, they did not expect that such a powerful attack would not cause them any substantial damage. Just when the monsters were confused, the bodies of their companions were cut into two halves, successfully arousing their anger. Unfortunately, the anger of the monsters would not slow down Lin's attack. The moment he saw the thought bullet flying, one of the monsters roared and punched out to crush it. Seeing that the monster was preparing to crush the teleportation bomb, Lin focused on the other monsters, and the sword lock instantly shifted its direction and flew towards the other monster. The power of this thought bullet is completely different from the previous sword light, and it condenses a large amount of Lin's thought energy. Boom! The result was just as Lin expected. The moment the mental bomb came into contact with the monster's fist, there was a huge explosion, and half of the monster's body was disabled by the mental bomb. The other 3 monsters kept dodging the flying knife locks, looking in Lean's direction with disbelieving eyes. Their lack of knowledge made them unable to understand why a human being as weak as an ant could kill someone in just an instant. They are 2 companions. Under Lean's control, Knife Lock continued to attack the monsters, keeping their position 5 meters away from him. Without retracting the Knife Lock, Lean reduced his attack targets. For him, precise control of the Knife Lock was also a very labor-intensive task. The other 2 monsters felt that the strange chain in front of them reduced the frequency of attacks on them. Avoiding the Knife Lock, he split into 2 directions and rushed toward Lean. For the monsters that have lived in the jungle for generations, human beings have extremely fragile bodies. Just one blow from the monsters will become their nourishment. The experience of countless sneak attacks on humans made them feel that their predecessors were too cautious in treating humans, and that Warcraft was born to be the strongest race. Looking at the monsters rushing toward him from both sides, Lean stood there, took a deep breath, and held the knife in front of him. Menchi was horrified to see the scene. Based on her knowledge of her own strength, 1 or 2 of these monsters would pose no difficulty to her, but if there were more than 4 monsters, she would choose to escape directly. The 2 monsters rushed towards Lean and attacked almost simultaneously. Menkai, who was watching the battle, felt his heart in his throat at this moment. SHH. SHH. Lean, who was standing there with the sword, moved, and Tang Dao Wushi swung it out at an extremely fast speed, so fast that Menchi, who was watching the battle, didn't even see the light of the sword. When Menkai reacted, a monster's head and a severed arm were chopped into the air. So strong. This was the only thought in Menkai's heart at the moment. The monster that had one of its arms cut off looked at the missing arm with endless fear in its eyes, and deep confusion reflected in its heart. In its perception, it was obvious that the attack was about to fall on the human being in front of it. Why did this happen? No one could explain its doubts, and what was coming was Lean's kick, which severely kicked the monster away. Turning his head, Lean looked at the last monster. Just now, this monster saw that all its members were dead and wounded. It made a mistake in a moment, and Lean found an opportunity. It was already tightly wrapped in chains, and it lost its ability to resist. Take custody. Ignoring Menkai who was at the side, the monster moved towards Lean under the pull of the chain. When it was a certain distance away, the monster disappeared instantly. It's amazing. I didn't expect you to be so strong. Are you really not a professional hunter? What a pity. If one escapes, he will definitely tip off the news. Menkai, who saw the end of the battle, ran over and started chirping to Lean. Let's go aside and take a rest first. As for the one that ran away, it will come back soon. Without explaining anything, Lean walked to the tree beside him and rested against the tree. Will it come back soon? After tilting his head and thinking for a while, Menkai didn't understand what Lean meant. Looking at Lean sitting under the tree and resting, Menkai took out a bottle of water from his backpack and walked to Lean. No, can you drink some water? Passing the water to Lean, Lean opened the lid and drank without any hesitation. Seeing Lean's lack of hesitation, Menkai asked doubtfully, do you just trust me so much? Aren't you afraid of me poisoning you? Goo. Goo. After drinking the water in his hand, Lean smiled and said, why would you poison me? This. Hearing Lean's question, Menkai didn't know how to answer for a moment, and was embarrassed on the spot for a moment. Suddenly, a trace of induction appeared in Lean's consciousness, and he knew that this was the effect of Wu's mind poison. Giving instructions to Niandu, Lean asked Menkai, how did you encounter these monsters? Menkai sat opposite Lean, sighed helplessly, and began to talk about his fate with Warcraft. After Menkai's description, Lean also knew the reason why these monsters were chasing Menkai. Roughly speaking, Menkai accidentally discovered traces of Warcraft while searching for rare ingredients, and followed the traces to find the residence of the Warcraft clan. Now that he has discovered the station, Menkai must investigate it. After all, the Warcraft clan will also treasure some good things. As a result, just as Menkai was preparing to sneak in, he bumped into several monsters. In the territory of the monsters, Menkai could only escape. After listening to Menkai's explanation, it was Lean's turn to become confused. Chapter 66. Reen asked with deep doubts, how did you sneak in? Things like Warcraft have an unusually developed sense of smell. Hearing this, Menkai explained with a proud look, it's very simple. I have developed a spice that can mask your own scent and adapt to the surrounding environment with just a small dose. After hearing Menkai's answer, Lin knew that this was definitely a good thing and would be of great help to him in whatever he did in the future. He must get it. Can you give me some of your spices? Lin asked tentatively. No problem. Menkai agreed happily, took out a small bottle from his body and threw it to Lin. Lin caught the flying bottle and said, thank you. Hearing this, Menkai waved his hands and said, you're welcome, after all, you just saved my life. But you are a professional hunter after all, right? How come you can't even defeat a few monsters? Lin's words were merciless and clearly aroused Menkai's emotions. Menkai said angrily, you think everyone is as strong as you? It's hard to beat 4 hands with 2 fists, okay? And that's not an ordinary monster. Do you understand that it's humanoid? It's very troublesome to solve. Seeing Menkai's angry look, Lin laughed and said, okay. Okay. Seeing Lin's look, Menkai was obviously furious. Just as she was about to say something, a sound of footsteps came, attracting her attention. Menkai showed up with a kitchen knife and was ready to fight. Looking along the sound, a monster with a broken arm and still bleeding blood appeared in Menkai's sight. It was the monster that had just escaped. At this moment, this monster looked strange to Menkai. Its eyes were confused and its expression was dull, not caring about the pain of his broken arm. Okay. I said it will come back. Lin's voice appeared, and what he said made Menkai even more confused. Ignoring Menkai's doubts, Lin said softly, can you avoid it for a while? I need to talk to this monster. Putting away the kitchen knife in his hand, Menkai nodded and left Lin's sight. Looking at the crescent-like mark on the monster's forehead, Lin took the monster with him into the prison with a thought. After entering the prison, Lin came to the interrogation room, preparing to obtain information about Tomi's forest by exploring the memory of Warcraft. Looking at the seat under the crystal, Lin had a thought in his mind and silently said, extract. After Lin finished reciting silently, a dull-looking monster appeared on the chair. Looking at the crystal above his head, Lin's consciousness began to enter it, constantly searching for the information in it. After some searching, Lin found many clues in the memory of Warcraft. Although the language of Warcraft is not similar to that of humans, through some actions and memory scenes, Lin still analyzed some useful things from them. The encounter between these monsters and Menkai was entirely due to Menkai's bad luck. When several World of Warcraft came home from playing, they happened to bump into Menkai who was about to leave, so a chase game began. Moreover, this group of monsters also hides many secrets, including that the sin points do not appear out of thin air. After searching the memory of Warcraft, Lin left the prison, but his expression was very heavy when he left. Come out! Lin shouted when he returned to the outside world. What? Are you done talking? Do you understand the language of Warcraft? Menkai, who was not far away, walked over. At this time, she had many questions, but most of all she was deeply curious about this white-haired young man. Yet, we chatted a lot and learned many secrets of this forest. Lin answered Menkai's question, but his tone was a little absent-minded. What secret? Tell me. Can. Menkai originally wanted to ask questions, but Menkai didn't expect Lin to agree so readily, and then the two of them sat by the tree and started chatting. Do you know why the NGL autonomous country used the army to blockade this forest? Of course I know, in order to prevent the creatures in the forest from running out and harming humans. Hearing Menkai's answer, Lin smiled softly and said, that's not the case. It's because the Warcraft clan living deep in the forest will come out of the forest to constantly hunt humans. Hunting humans? Impossible. If this situation had happened in NGL, the Hunters Association would have been notified long ago. Menkai's eyes widened in disbelief. Lin looked at Menkai and said in a deep voice, what if the NGL autonomous country is also involved in this matter? Hearing Lin's words, Menkai was stunned and said stiffly, probably not. How can humans do such a thing with Warcraft? Lin spread his hands and said helplessly, that's the truth. For the country, racial differences are not important. The most important thing is the benefits brought by cooperation. Menkai asked doubtfully, profit? Yes. Benefits? With a firm look in his eyes, Lin said with certainty. Every once in a while, the royal family of NGL will send people to collect a kind of fruit near the Mizi forest. Although the specific function of the fruit is unclear, using humans as nutrients is definitely not a good thing. And I know the one who gathered the fruit, and he was the one who brought me into the country. After listening to what Lin said, Menkai suddenly realized, no wonder NGL allowed entry into the forest for this kind of business. Not only that, when I passed through a certain area before, the ferocious beasts there were so united. I suspected that these ferocious beasts were controlled by those magical beasts. If the incoming explorers are the main material for Warcraft, the troops stationed there are the spare parts. Lin analyzed the situation based on the actual situation, and the result surprised Menkai. He didn't expect that there was such a trick in it. Then let's leave quickly and report this matter to the Hunter Association. They will definitely send someone to deal with it. Menkai's tone was filled with anger, and she was very dissatisfied with the behavior of the NGL royal family in Warcraft. Notify the association? You are overthinking, miss. NGL is a non-member country, and the association will not handle it at all. The most it can do is give you a warning. After listening to Lin's explanation, Menkai instantly gave up the idea of notifying the association and became silent. Although both parties remained silent, Lin knew very well that Menkai would find out about this sooner or later. This is the role of intelligence. Through a little information, a lot of useful things can be completely deduced. The problem between Lin and Menkai now is not the intelligence of their minds, but the amount of information they know. Lin decided to tell Menkai the information he knew. After all, he already had a rough plan and needed Menkai's cooperation. Based on the situation, Lin combined the existing intelligence and analyzed, the monsters lost this time in the Warcraft clan are just adults in the clan, and can be regarded as the cornerstone of their next generation. For an ethnic group whose number does not exceed 50, we are equivalent to creating a small gap for them. This huge hatred is not ordinary. Chapter 67. After hearing this, Menkai interrupted without waiting for Lin to continue. So you are planning to destroy these monsters? Of course, they are not a group of good people anyway. Killing them can be regarded as eliminating harm for the people. Besides, you are not interested in the collection of Warcraft? That is an extremely generous reward. 4. 6. Originally, Lin thought that getting Menkai to cooperate would require some persuasion, but he didn't expect that the other party had already thought about the share. It seemed that Menkai had long been coveted for the collection of Warcraft. However, for Lin, this share ratio is obviously a disadvantage, and Menkai must not be allowed to take advantage of it. 2. 8. Without any hesitation, Lin offered the price. 3. 7. This is the bottom line. Whether you need to adjust it later depends on whether the battle plan you gave is worth the price. Menkai had no intention of arguing, but chose to think about the issue rationally and make a decision only after weighing it up. It doesn't matter how much the two parties share. After all, these things are still in the lair of the group of monsters. If they don't get it, they are not theirs. Even if there are things in the final collection that both parties want, they can still be resolved through negotiation or equal exchange. When Menkai heard Lin's information about the monsters, she already knew that Lin was planning to attack this group of monsters. At the same time, since Lin said that he could obtain the collection of Warcraft, it proved that the guy in front of him was obviously more than 80% sure. Menkai didn't know what method Lin would use. The reason why he proposed a share in the first place was for two purposes. On the one hand, you should take the initiative in your own hands, so that you will not be passive in the cooperation between the two. On the other hand, it was sending a signal to Lin that cooperation was possible. As for the combat plans of both parties, Menkai will calmly analyze and choose to join or withdraw based on the current actual situation. No problem. 37 is 37. The battle plan is like this. Listening to Lin's description of the battle plan, a look of surprise appeared on Menkai's face, and then the surprise turned into full joy. I didn't expect you to come up with such a method. It seems that I still took advantage of it. After understanding the battle plan in detail, Menkai was very confident about the part he was responsible for. He couldn't help but feel that the young man in front of him was really outstanding. Lin waved his hands repeatedly and said modestly, "These are nothing, but whether we can succeed or not depends entirely on you." Menkai nodded, indicating that he understood what Lin meant. Lin checked the time and explained to Menkai, "Currently, those monsters don't know that they have lost 5 members of the clan. We must act before the other party is alert. I need to find some materials and meet here in 6 hours. During this time, you have to clean up the traces of the battle just now and avoid being discovered by other monsters." Menkai looked at the area where he had just fought and said confidently, "No problem." Seeing Menkai agreeing so readily, Lin turned around and left. He needed to prepare something for his next plan. After leaving Menkai, Lin walked to a remote place and entered the prison with a thought. 6 hours later. In the quiet forest, Lin's figure slowly appeared. Different from when he entered the prison, he was holding a bulging backpack. After confirming the location, Lin returned along the original route, preparing to find Menkai and start the battle plan. Following the path he came on, Lin saw Menkai's figure. The moment Lin walked over, Menkai looked over cautiously. When he saw it was Lin, he was relieved. Lin smiled slightly, walked over with his backpack, threw the backpack at Menkai's feet, took out a piece of paper and handed it to Menkai. Menkai opened the paper handed over by Lin. It contained dense contents, but he read it carefully. A few minutes later, Menkai put away the paper, picked up the backpack beside him, nodded to Lin and left. Looking at Menkai's disappearing back, Lin murmured, "The next step is up to you." 3 hours later, as the sky gradually turned dark, Menkai's figure appeared in Lin's sight. "Has it been arranged as required?" The moment Menkai approached, Lin asked. "Don't worry. It has been arranged as required." Menkai's tone was full of confidence, and he handed the empty backpack to Lin. After taking the empty backpack, Lin said solemnly to Menkai, "The next step depends on our cooperation. I hope there are no accidents." Menkai nodded and solemnly promised, "Don't worry, leave it to me. One of them will definitely not escape. My name is Lin Pester, just call me Lin." Gourmet Hunter, Menkai, happy working together. After saying that, the two looked at each other and smiled. At this time, the two sides were completely on the same front, and they were groping towards the Warcraft station together. Walking near the Warcraft station, Lin looked at the buildings in the distance, knowing that success or failure depended on this. Ziobai is possessed, burst mode. Summoning Ziobai, Ziobai immediately attached himself to Lin. In an instant, a large amount of life essence burst out, and the huge power shocked Men Chi on the side. Now, Lin's physique is different from that before in the ruins. The huge strength makes Lin feel like he holds the world in his hands. Lin knew that this was just an illusion of rapid growth in power. The most important thing was that he could control this power. There was no time to waste, the burst mode could only last for 30 minutes. During this time, Rin had a lot to do. "Wait for my signal." Before he finished speaking, Lin had already disappeared, leaving Menkai unable to react at all. After a few seconds, Menkai said angrily, "Who is this person?" The signal didn't say anything. At this time, Lin used his extreme speed to rush into the village of Warcraft. Smelling the smell of blood in the air, he felt murderous intent in his heart. Warcraft naturally discovered Lin who broke in. After all, it was impossible to break into someone else's territory openly without being discovered. It's just that Lin's speed was too fast for the Warcraft to stop him at all. Lin ran to the center of the village, which was a wide square. Not interested in observing the surrounding situation, Lin took out a wooden block the size of a millstone from the storage space. He directly stepped on the wooden block into the ground with one foot, slowly injected his mind energy into it, and used his mental power to link it with the surroundings. When the Warcraft rushed towards Lin, a layer of power grid rose up around the Warcraft village, completely blocking the possibility of the Warcraft escaping. Seeing the power grid appear, Lin looked at the ferocious monster charging towards him, with a calm expression on his face, and increased his energy flow. The world of Warcraft's reaction speed and movement speed were very fast. Just when it was almost approaching Lin's position, Lin thought to himself, "It's done." In an instant, Lin disappeared and entered the prison, causing the attacking monster to lose its target. Chapter 68. Seeing Lin's figure disappear, Warcraft's eyes were full of doubts, and they looked at each other, just as they were about to look for him. Suddenly, a huge current emitted from the center and periphery of the village. The electric currents seemed to respond to each other, forming an electric wave that swept across the entire village. The speed of the current was very fast, and the two currents collided quickly, completely surrounding the village of Warcraft. The monsters inside were unable to react at all. These monsters who have lived in the Tommy Forest for generations have never seen such a thing except thunder in nature. At this point, Lin's plan was basically implemented perfectly. Menkai outside the village had excitement in his eyes and murmured, "Is this the power of the divine word? Although I have been exposed to it before, it is a pity that it is impossible to learn this thing without talent. A huge electric current enveloped the village, and the monster had no time to react. Instantly, the monster's body on the ground began to twitch, and it couldn't even speak. In the prison, Lin kept breathing heavily, and the huge consumption of his thoughts made him unable to bear it after being enhanced by the essence of life. Sure enough, the divine word is not suitable to play a major role in battle. With a sigh, Lin released the burst mode and used Ju to recover the excessive mental energy he had just lost. Looking at Xiaobai who looked sluggish, Lin said gently, "Go and rest." "Surge!" he yelled tiredly. Xiaobai then flew to a place where life energy was abundant. "You should be able to go out in 5 minutes." Lin roughly estimated the time, and while maintaining absolute, he reviewed whether there were any omissions in this plan. Initially, in order to deal with the Warcraft group, Lin planned to use a large-scale attack method. Otherwise, some of the unique abilities of the Warcraft, coupled with the group's numerical advantage, would put the two of them into a dangerous situation. Previously, Lin had always felt that Divine Word was more suitable as an auxiliary ability, which could be combined in various situations to produce unexpected effects. The battle plan mentioned to Menkai this time was also very simple. It was to use divine characters to set up a trap similar to a formation to cover the entire Warcraft clan. After all, any strange abilities and special means must be completed with the ability to move in a clear mind. Lin planned to take advantage of the intelligence gap with Warcraft to catch him off guard. Originally, it was not necessary to cooperate with Menkai in this matter, but the task of placing the divine characters around was related to hiding the whereabouts. It can be said that Lin had no experience in this aspect. As a food hunter, Menkai must be better at hiding his tracks than Lin, so he came up with the plan to join forces. Even if it didn't succeed, it would be an extra insurance. As for the share for Menkai, what Lin values is not the collection of Warcraft at all, and those things may not be of much use to him. What Lin really cares about is the sin value that appeared on the Warcraft before. After all, if there is one, there is the second. When the group of monsters rushed toward Lin, Lin used the Eye of Judgment to clearly see the heads of several monsters, which displayed the number of sin points. However, there were still 10 sin points left before they could be upgraded. As far as prisons are concerned, it's just a drop in the bucket. The next step is to finish. Seeing that the time was up, Lin released the Zero mode and instantly returned to the outside world of Warcraft Village. At this time, what Lin saw was that the monsters had been electrocuted and fell to the ground, their bodies twitching non-stop. He looked down at the wooden block embedded in the ground and saw that it had turned into charcoal. Seeing this situation, Lin summoned Wu Forgiveness and killed the monsters without sin value one by one, and put the monsters with sin value into prison. 35. 37. While cleaning up the monsters in the village, Lin recorded the number of monsters. According to the memory of the monsters, except for the previous few, there were a total of 46 monsters in the village. Since he chose to take action, Lin would naturally not choose to leave anyone alive. Although this did not pose much of a threat to him, Lin still knew that the family needed to be in order. When Lin was cleaning up the 40th monster, Menkai came over, holding 2 monsters in his hand. Throwing the monsters to Lin's feet, Menkai said, 2 of them were controlled by the power grid. They have been solved. Lin nodded, and while continuing to search for the remaining monsters, he said to Menkai, "Why so late? Now you are late." "Late? You don't know the power of your power grid. It will take a while before I dare to come in." "What? Are you trying to shock me too?" Hearing this, Lin touched his nose in embarrassment and changed the subject. "There are still 4 monsters that have not been found. Let's look for them together." "No problem." Menkai agreed without hesitation and searched for the remaining monsters with Lin. After a period of searching, Lin and Menkai found nothing. "I can't find it anywhere, and I don't even know where to put those collections of monsters." Menkai's expression was a little solemn. If he couldn't find it, it meant that her and Lin's work was in vain. Moreover, when exploring the forest, they had to be careful of the revenge of those monsters. "Don't be so pessimistic. Just wait for me here. I'll be back soon." Rin expressed relief, then found a hidden corner and entered the prison. In the interrogation room, Lin began to interrogate the monsters in prison one by one, searching for relevant memories in their minds. It wasn't until he searched for a monster that Lin understood why the 4 monsters were not in the village. The Warcraft clan is famously cautious and will never leave precious items around. Instead, they send people to hide them, and Lin also knows the location through the other party's memory. And that location turned out to be the place where the red fruit was cultivated, but in addition to the weird red fruit, there was also a fruit that Lin didn't recognize, which was well protected. Observing the scene between the prisoner and the 4 monsters, Lin clearly knew the opponent's abilities. The most dangerous monster among them was more difficult for him. He could control poisonous insects through the flute. The information has been collected, and Lin did not stay in the prison. The moment he returned to the outside world, he went to meet Men Qi. Lin found Menkai in the village and gave an overview of the current situation. What you mean is that in the northeast of the village, the Warcraft clan has sent experts from 4 clans to guard precious items. After hearing Lin's explanation, Menkai suddenly realized that no wonder he found nothing in his search just now. Lin nodded, and then shared the information about the Warcraft with Menkai, preparing to kill the remaining Warcraft in one fell swoop. After analyzing it calmly, Menkai said confidently, "I can deal with 2 of them. Leave the one that can control poisonous insects to me. I have the ability to restrain it very well." Chapter 69. Lin completely believed in what Menkai said, which professional hunter could not use the trick of pressing the bottom of the box. "Okay, when the time comes we will separate them, and whoever solves them first will help the other party." "No problem." The 2 discussed the plan while chatting and laughing, and Lin explained in detail the targets that Menkai needed to deal with on the way. After traveling all the way, Lin and Menkai arrived near their destination. Looking at the surrounding fences built to prevent wild beasts, Lin became curious about those fruits. He didn't understand what kind of fruits the royal family of the NGL autonomous country valued so much. But the answer is about to be revealed, and we just need to get through this hurdle. Walking near the fence, Lin deliberately made a walking sound. After previous observations, this kind of monster may be the reason for its long-term isolation from the outside world. Apart from its strong physical fitness and strong sense of smell and hearing, it does not have any outstanding features. In this regard, Lin has no intention of hiding his whereabouts. With the strength of him and Menkai, it can be said that there is no possibility of losing. Just to be careful and discuss countermeasures with Menkai to prevent the boat from capsizing in the gutter. When the monsters in the house inside the fence heard Lin's footsteps, they recognized that the footsteps were different from those of the clan members. The only answer they could get was that an intruder had sneaked in. The monsters in the room came out in full force, much faster than any monster Lin had ever encountered. This shows that the monster clan attaches great importance to this place. 4 monsters rushed out at extremely fast speeds and stood on the fence in the blink of an eye, looking down at Lin and Menkai. One of the monsters twitched its nose and sniffed, its eyes instantly turned red, and it said something to its companions around it. It looked at Lin with a pair of red eyes and rushed towards him. Lin didn't know what Warcraft said. It was just a moment of conversation that made all the eyes of Warcraft focus on Lin. Looking at the eyes filled with murderous intent, Lin stood with a knife in his hand and concentrated on preparing for the next battle. The moment the 4 monsters rushed towards him, Menkai materialized a kitchen knife without saying a word, leaving Lin where he was, and rushed towards his chosen target. "Your opponent is me, so don't pick the wrong person." Throwing the kitchen knife away, the kitchen knife flew in an arc and blocked the 2 monsters. One of them had a long flute tied to his waist. The demonic beast had a fierce expression, seemingly filled with endless hatred, waving the weapon in its hand and attacking Lin. When Lin saw the long stick in Warcraft's hand, he immediately turned around and ran towards the other side of Menkai. When the 2 monsters saw Lin running away, they immediately chased after him, looking at their enemy with endless hatred in their eyes. The terrain in the forest was extremely complex, and Lin knew that if he ran for a long time, it would be a matter of time before he was overtaken by a monster familiar with the forest environment. But instead of running away, Lin kept distance from Menkai to avoid being affected by the poisonous insects controlled by the monster. After running a certain distance, Lin felt that he was almost done. He turned around and saw the monster chasing behind him. Without any hesitation, he held the long knife and killed the monster. By moving the battlefield, Lin also tested the speed of these 2 monsters. Although they were stronger than the monsters in the village, their strength was limited. SHH. With one slash, the long stick was cut off by the knife, and the sharp blade scratched the fur of the monster. In the shock of the monster, Lin kicked out and kicked one of the monsters away. When he turned around, he hit Lin on the head with a stick. The body turned slightly sideways, and the moment the long knife blocked the long stick, Lin used the power of the long stick to distance himself. The monster that was kicked away by Lin applied saliva on his palms, rubbed the newly scratched area, picked up the broken long stick with both hands, and continued to attack Lin. Looking at the monster with hatred in its eyes, Lin did not choose to fight in close combat. Instead, he threw out the sword lock and continuously attacked the monster from a distance. For a moment, the two parties seemed to be in a tug-of-war, with no one touching the other. The two monsters launched several attacks and seemed to be more impatient. One of the monsters grabbed Lin's chain and spoke a language that Lin couldn't understand. Seeing this, the other monster immediately ran to the chain, grabbed the chain and pulled it hard. Seeing the movements of the monster, Lin knew that the other party wanted to drag him over. Moreover, these two monsters were smart enough to know that it was impossible to defeat Lin in a one-on-one situation, and had no intention of splitting up for a sneak attack. "You want my knife? I'll give it to you." With a chuckle, Lin let go of Wu Shen in his hand. For a moment, there was a powerless stalemate. The monsters had no time to react and fell backwards. The demonic beasts that climbed up from the ground felt even more furious in their hearts. They had killed many humans, and they thought they knew humans very well. In the understanding of these four monsters, humans are weak and greedy creatures. Facing powerful monsters, they will only become nourishment. Unexpectedly, today, they, who are invincible in killing people, would be played by humans. A monster stepped forward angrily, picked up the Wuxian thrown by Lin, and signaled his companions with his eyes to attack first. When the attacking monster passed its companions, a knife suddenly penetrated its abdomen, and bright red blood spilled on the ground. With disbelief in his eyes, Warcraft looked at his former companion, and suddenly noticed that the other person's expression was slightly dull. At this moment, it recalled memories from long ago. The elders in the clan warned that humans are cunning creatures, so we Warcraft are even more cunning than humans. It is difficult to recall the past, because the Warcraft has been knocked unconscious by the approaching Lin, and what is left for it will be to reunite with those elders again, but in prison. Taking Wu Sheng from the hands of the monsters, Lin put the two monsters into prison. Looking at the direction where Menkai was fighting, Lin murmured, "There are two more." At that time, when Lin saw these four monsters for the first time, he could clearly see that the sin points on those monsters were obviously more than those in the village. It was obvious that these guys not only guarded something, but were also executioners. Following the direction he came from, Lin quickly rushed towards Menkai's location. He had made an agreement with Menkai that whoever solved the fight first would go to help, but Lin would not break his promise. After all, there were still two prisoners who needed him to take custody. Arriving at Menkai's battlefield, Lin watched from a distance and found that Menkai and the two monsters were fighting back and forth. There were many corpses of poisonous insects on the ground, and even the flute of the monster was cut off by Menkai. Seeing Menkai's fighting situation, Lin instantly felt relieved, holding the weapon in hand and ready to join the battle at any time. Watching Menkai's battle, Lin had to sigh. She was indeed the best among the food hunters. I was afraid that she had arrived a little late and it was time for her to end the battle. Chapter 70. Watching Menkai's battle, Lin had to sigh. She was indeed the best among the food hunters. I was afraid that she had arrived a little late and it was time for her to end the battle. Without the slightest delay, the moment Menkai forced back a monster, Lin's sword lock flew out, piercing the chest of the repulsed monster. "Take custody." The moment the chain flew back with the Warcraft was already imprisoned by Lin. The only remaining monster on the field saw Rin's figure, and it understood that its companion had been wiped out by the human in front of it. Roar! With a desperate roar, the monster rushed towards Lin with red eyes. Seeing that the monster was ready to fight to the death, Lin reversed his blade and rushed over at extremely fast speed. Rin and Warcraft instantly intertwined, and both parties fell to the ground. But while the monster was in the air, it had already received a blow from Lin and fainted instantly. "It's the last one, take it into custody." After collecting the last spoils, Lin looked at Menkai and said, "It's time to collect our spoils." Menkai put away the kitchen knife and said with a smile, "I can't wait for a long time. This feeling similar to opening a treasure box is really exciting." Lin walked towards the inside of the fence and said as he walked, "Then let's wait and see." Walking into the fence, the surrounding scene is like an ecological garden, except for a few surrounding rooms, which are full of plants. Countless fiery red plants soared into the sky, and the bright red fruit showed a coquettish color. Lin pointed to the red fruits and said, "These should be the fruits of the NGL Autonomous Country transaction." Menkai nodded, walked to the roots of the plant, sticky the soil on the ground with his hands, and put it to the tip of his nose to smell it. Sure enough, the smell of blood that I just smelled comes from this soil. If what I expected is correct, the monsters hunt humans just to grow this plant. Menkai had an affirmative tone and a look full of anger. Haha. It seems that killing these monsters is indeed the right choice. After sneering, Lin stepped forward to pick a few fruits and put them into the storage room without Menkai noticing. Although Lin knew that since these fruits were watered with human blood, they were definitely not good things, but he was very concerned about the effects of the fruits and planned to take the time to study them. Glancing at Menkai who was still observing the plants, Lin urged, "Let's go forward and take a look. There must be more than just these plants in the collection." Menkai heard this and looked towards those rooms. The two of them opened the door of one of the rooms with anticipation, and what they saw was a large amount of gold nuggets. The bright light almost blinded the two of them. However, the two of them only glanced at each other before going to the next room. After all, strength is paramount in the hunter world, and not everyone is interested in money. The second room was opened, and there were some specimens of poisonous insects stored inside. The two of them didn't even look carefully, and just closed the door without any interest in studying. The two of them looked at the door of the last room, which was also the largest among them, but this time they didn't have much expectations for the items inside. When you open the door, you will see some daily necessities and beds. It should be the room where these monsters rest. It was just a huge stone tablet in the room that caught Lin's attention, and what was depicted on it shocked Lin. It seems there really isn't anything I need here. I'll go look elsewhere. The sound of disappointment came, and before Lin could react, Menkai had already left the room. Looking carefully at the picture on the stone tablet, although there was no text on it, Lin still recognized something painted on it. The legendary alchemical plant, Metalion. Looking at the portrait above, Lin felt that it seemed to be a road map, but the description was vague and it was not properly kept, making it difficult to identify. Touching the carvings on the stone tablet with his hand, Lin felt the breath of time under his fingers, and couldn't help but murmured, "It's a pity that Jin is not here, otherwise he must be very interested." Just as Lin was sighing, there were chaotic footsteps outside the door. When Lin turned around, Menkai appeared outside the door holding 2 cyan fruits. Seeing Menkai's excited expression, Lin knew she must have found something good. "Lin, look what I found." Holding the fruit in his hand, Menkai showed it to Lin with an excited expression. In fact, the moment he saw the fruit, Lin knew that it was the cyan fruit in the memory of Warcraft, and its specific function was unknown. Lin even suspected that those blood-red fruits were mutant varieties of this fruit. "What kind of fruit is this? Do you recognize it?" Lin asked. Menkai smiled mysteriously. Looking at the fruit, he said, "Do you remember the notebook I showed you, the artery fruit recorded in it? You said this is the artery fruit." Lin was a little surprised. After all, no one knew what the artery fruit looked like. Menkai smiled confidently and said, "It must be the artery fruit. It is full of the breath of life. I can feel it." After Menkai finished speaking, he threw one of the fruits to Lin, wiped the fruit in his hand and took a bite. As soon as Lin caught the fruit, he saw that Menkai had already taken a bite, and he had no time to stop him. He couldn't help but feel a headache. "It smells very fragrant, with the natural breath of life. My physical strength seems to have increased a lot, giving me a feeling of a gift from nature." After eating the fruit, Menkai closed her eyes and carefully felt the feeling brought by the fruit, with a happy expression on her face. Seeing Menkai enjoying it so much, especially the physical strength of the sentence seemed to have increased a lot, which completely attracted Lin. After observing Menkai for a while, Lin no longer hesitated and took the fruit into his stomach in a few mouthfuls. Feeling the taste of the fruit, Lin finally understood what Menkai was talking about, the breath of life. It was a feeling of returning to the original, very warm and reassuring. Continuing to experience it, a warm current continued to gush out from his body and spread over Lin's limbs and bones. Lin felt that this gentle nourishment was more powerful than A-grade ingredients. Even at this moment, Lin began to wonder if this fruit was a product of the Dark Continent and had already exceeded the A-level limit. Slowly realizing the changes in his body, Lin suddenly felt an inexplicable heat in his body, and as the heat flow circulated in his body, the feeling of heat became stronger and stronger. While Lin was confused, a pair of cold red lips pressed on his face. When encountering this situation, Lin didn't know that this was a side effect of the fruit, so he was ready to summon Xiaobai to solve the problem. The moment Lin started to act, a wave of heat rushed straight into his brain, causing Lin's consciousness to be directly replaced by instinct, and he hugged Menkai tightly. Chapter 71. After an unknown amount of time, Lin woke up and looked at the messy clothes on the ground, and was stunned for a moment. Although his body was occupied by instinct, with that comfortable warmth, Lin still knew what he was doing at that time. I just couldn't control my body's instinct and finally fell into it. Turning his head to look at Menkai's smooth skin and the dots of fallen plum blossoms on the sheets, Lin knew that he was in big trouble this time. Lin carefully stood up from the bed, picked up the scattered clothes, and quietly walked out of the door. After putting on his clothes, Lin looked at the sunset and felt a little unsure of where to go. Forget it, now that things have reached this point, we can only take one step at a time. Since coming to the hunter world, Lin has encountered many dangers, and this is the first time he encountered such a situation where he was at a loss. Sure enough, problems between people are the biggest trouble. Muttering to himself, Lin prepared to get some food first. After all, he and Menkai had not eaten for a day. Ugh! Looking at the pieces of meat that kept sizzling in the pot, Lin's expression was a little dull, and it took a long time before he came back to his senses. That feeling is so damn good. Without knowing what he thought of, Lin swore and threw the spices in his hand into the pot. Smelling the fragrant meat, Lin felt no appetite at all and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. In his previous life, Lin also had several relationships, but they all ended without any problems due to some reasons. Men and women have also experienced things, but the social environment at that time was the product of great waves, and there was no burden if measures were taken well. When encountering this situation now, the sum of the past life and this life is something that Lin has never thought about. He admitted in his heart that he was really not a good person now, but he had nothing to do with animals. Endless tangles were entangled in Lin's heart, and he didn't even know that the meat in the pot was being taken out. Hey, Lin, your craftsmanship is really good. This piece of meat is completely delicious. Well, the ingredients are also very high-end. Lin was startled by the sudden sound. The moment he raised his head, he saw Menkai with long pink hair eating a piece of meat. Ah! Lin was a little at a loss at the moment, his mind was in a mess, he didn't know how to answer, and he was speechless for a moment. Lin held back a few words for a long time and hummed, I will be responsible to you. After saying this, Lin regretted it. He had no idea how this sentence came out of his mouth. Ha! 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 After Lin finished speaking, Menkai was greeted with laughter. Lin was shocked when he saw this scene. He couldn't understand why something that was obviously very formal seemed like a comedy. Menkai smiled and waved his hand, indicating to Lin to wait a moment. Just looking at Menkai, who was laughing so hard that he was out of breath, Lin felt a little embarrassed. Suddenly, Lin saw the meat residue at the corner of her mouth. He took out a tissue and wiped it away from the corner of Menkai's mouth. Lin carefully wiped the residue at the corners of Menkai's mouth with a tissue, and suddenly found that Menkai's face turned red. Throwing away the tissue in his hand, Menkai's voice came to Lin's ears. I changed my mind. Since you said you were responsible, then be my boyfriend for life. Menkai's voice was firm, but Lin looked at her red face and heard a hint of willfulness. Lin asked doubtfully, a lifelong boyfriend? Yet. Menkai nodded cutely. At this moment, the doubts in Lin's heart reached a climax, and he thought to himself, what do you mean, don't play riddles? Want to know? Miss you. Menkai put down the bowls and chopsticks in his hands, looked at Lin with burning eyes, and said seriously, I am a food hunter, and my life is destined to be dedicated to the endless wilderness, so I have never considered finding a partner. Because I don't have time to live an ordinary life. Getting married and having children is very far away from me, and I may never consider it in my lifetime. But... Menkai paused, looking at Lin with a meaningful look, and his face turned slightly red. But what? Lin asked doubtfully. Taking a deep breath, Menchi said sternly, I just thought about it and it's actually not bad to have a boyfriend, especially a boyfriend with high strength and good looks like you. You mean you won't marry me and I will always be just your boyfriend? At this moment, Lin was a little confused. Do people in this world think this way? Isn't this very similar to the noun named Pi in the previous life? Have I entered the ranks of long-term prostitutes? So who is prostitution for free? Menkai's words left Lin confused, and he fell into infinite tangles in his heart. In fact, what Lin didn't know was that Menkai understood what happened the moment he woke up. After all, he was the one who caused the trouble, so he couldn't blame Lin entirely. He had absolutely no intention of causing trouble for Lin because of this incident. He even suppressed his disappointment in his heart and prepared to completely forget about today's incident. Daly came to Lin without mentioning this incident, just to tell Lin that this incident was over and it would be treated as if it had never happened in the future. Anyway, the two of them probably would not encounter each other in this life after leaving the forest. What Menkai didn't expect was that Lin didn't pay attention to his thoughts at all, and he didn't know what he was thinking about. It wasn't until Lin wiped the corners of Menkai's mouth with a tissue that Menkai felt a little moved at that moment. But at the same time, she also understood that with her life goals, she was destined to spend her time in endless pursuits and would never be a qualified wife. So I thought of a compromise. After all, the man in front of me was really good to Menchi. The superb craftsmanship, strong strength, and most importantly, the handsome face, and the gentleness revealed inadvertently made Menkai very satisfied. Menkai smiled and said, "What? You don't want to?" No, I'm just thinking about what I should do as your boyfriend." Lin waved his hands repeatedly. He felt that his condition today was really bad and he couldn't react to many things at all. Hey. Menchi smiled slyly and affirmed, "There is no need to do anything. Just be by my side when I need you most. Of course, the most important thing is to make me happy." "No problem." With firm eyes and an affirmative tone, Lin agreed without hesitation. Menkai was a little surprised by Lin's reaction. "You agreed so quickly, which gave me an unreal feeling. What if you get married in the future?" "I haven't thought about getting married at all." Lin's answer was an understatement, but at the same time, he also knew that he was a person who longed for freedom and would never be trapped in a corner, but would use his life to challenge the endless unknown. Chapter 72. After an unknown amount of time, Lin woke up and looked at the messy clothes on the ground, and was stunned for a moment. Although his body was occupied by instinct, with that comfortable warmth, Lin still knew what he was doing at that time. "I just couldn't control my body's instinct and finally fell into it." Turning his head to look at Menkai's smooth skin and the dots of fallen plum blossoms on the sheets, Lin knew that he was in big trouble this time. Lin carefully stood up from the bed, picked up the scattered clothes, and quietly walked out of the door. After putting on his clothes, Lin looked at the sunset and felt a little unsure of where to go. Forget it, now that things have reached this point, we can only take one step at a time. Since coming to the hunter world, Lin has encountered many dangers, and this is the first time he encountered such a situation where he was at a loss. Sure enough, problems between people are the biggest trouble. Muttering to himself, Lin prepared to get some food first. After all, he and Menkai had not eaten for a day. Ugh! Looking at the pieces of meat that kept sizzling in the pot, Lin's expression was a little dull, and it took a long time before he came back to his senses. That feeling is so damn good. Without knowing what he thought of, Lin swore and threw the spices in his hand into the pot. Smelling the fragrant meat, Lin felt no appetite at all and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. In his previous life, Lin also had several relationships, but they all ended without any problems due to some reasons. Men and women have also experienced things, but the social environment at that time was the product of great waves, and there was no burden if measures were taken well. When encountering this situation now, the sum of the past life and this life is something that Lin has never thought about. He admitted in his heart that he was really not a good person now, but he had nothing to do with animals. Endless tangles were entangled in Lin's heart, and he didn't even know that the meat in the pot was being taken out. Hey, Lin, your craftsmanship is really good. This piece of meat is completely delicious. Well, the ingredients are also very high-end. Lin was startled by the sudden sound. The moment he raised his head, he saw Menkai with long pink hair eating a piece of meat. Ah! Lin was a little at a loss at the moment, his mind was in a mess, he didn't know how to answer, and he was speechless for a moment. Lin held back a few words for a long time and hummed, "I will be responsible to you." After saying this, Lin regretted it. He had no idea how this sentence came out of his mouth. Ha! After Lin finished speaking, Menkai was greeted with laughter. Lin was shocked when he saw this scene. He couldn't understand why something that was obviously very formal seemed like a comedy. Menkai smiled and waved his hand, indicating to Lin to wait a moment. Just looking at Menkai, who was laughing so hard that he was out of breath, Lin felt a little embarrassed. Suddenly, Lin saw the meat residue at the corner of her mouth. He took out a tissue and wiped it away from the corner of Menkai's mouth. Lin carefully wiped the residue at the corners of Menkai's mouth with a tissue, and suddenly found that Menkai's face turned red. Throwing away the tissue in his hand, Menkai's voice came to Lin's ears. I changed my mind. Since you said you were responsible, then be my boyfriend for life. Menkai's voice was firm, but Lin looked at her red face and heard a hint of willfulness. Lin asked doubtfully, a lifelong boyfriend? Yet. Menkai nodded cutely. At this moment, the doubts in Lin's heart reached a climax, and he thought to himself, what do you mean, don't play riddles? Want to know? Miss you. Menkai put down the bowls and chopsticks in his hands, looked at Lin with burning eyes, and said seriously, I am a food hunter, and my life is destined to be dedicated to the endless wilderness, so I have never considered finding a partner. Because I don't have time to live an ordinary life. Getting married and having children is very far away from me, and I may never consider it in my lifetime. But... Menkai paused, looking at Lin with a meaningful look, and his face turned slightly red. But what? Lin asked doubtfully. Taking a deep breath, Menchi said sternly, I just thought about it and it's actually not bad to have a boyfriend, especially a boyfriend with high strength and good looks like you. You mean you won't marry me and I will always be just your boyfriend? At this moment, Lin was a little confused. Do people in this world think this way? Isn't this very similar to the noun named Pi in the previous life? Have I entered the ranks of long-term prostitutes? So who is prostitution for free? Menkai's words left Lin confused, and he fell into infinite tangles in his heart. In fact, what Lin didn't know was that Menkai understood what happened the moment he woke up. After all, he was the one who caused the trouble, so he couldn't blame Lin entirely. He had absolutely no intention of causing trouble for Lin because of this incident. He even suppressed his disappointment in his heart and prepared to completely forget about today's incident. Daly came to Lin without mentioning this incident, just to tell Lin that this incident was over and it would be treated as if it had never happened in the future. Anyway, the two of them probably would not encounter each other in this life after leaving the forest. What Menkai didn't expect was that Lin didn't pay attention to his thoughts at all, and he didn't know what he was thinking about. It wasn't until Lin wiped the corners of Menkai's mouth with a tissue that Menkai felt a little moved at that moment. But at the same time, she also understood that with her life goals, she was destined to spend her time in endless pursuits and would never be a qualified wife. So I thought of a compromise. After all, the man in front of me was really good to Menchi. The superb craftsmanship, strong strength, and most importantly, the handsome face, and the gentleness revealed inadvertently made Menkai very satisfied. Menkai smiled and said, What? You don't want to? No, I'm just thinking about what I should do as your boyfriend. Lin waved his hands repeatedly. He felt that his condition today was really bad and he couldn't react to many things at all. Hey. Menchi smiled slyly and affirmed, there is no need to do anything. Just be by my side when I need you most. Of course, the most important thing is to make me happy. No problem. With firm eyes and an affirmative tone, Lin agreed without hesitation. Menkai was a little surprised by Lin's reaction, you agreed so quickly, which gave me an unreal feeling. What if you get married in the future? I haven't thought about getting married at all. Lin's answer was an understatement, but at the same time, he also knew that he was a person who longed for freedom and would never be trapped in a corner, but would use his life to challenge the endless unknown. Chapter 73. Hunter Calendar December 1998. The garrison point of Tommy Forest Army. You two are worthy of being forest hunters. After entering Tommy Forest for 3 months, they only killed a few large ferocious beasts. The officer looked at the man and woman in front of him. He didn't expect that the huge forest would allow these two to meet together. This man and woman were Lin and Menkai, who had stayed in Tommy's forest for more than 3 months. After Menkai got drunk that night, the relationship between Lin and Menkai became more harmonious. After burning the strange plants and artery fruits planted by the monsters, Lin and Menkai began hunting in Tommy's forest. Regarding the artery fruit, Lin and Menkai suspected that the real role of this fruit for the Warcraft clan was to propagate the race. As for Lin's other guess, he did not inform Menkai. He suspected that the ancestors of this ethnic group came from the Dark Continent. In order to ensure the reproduction of the race, the ancestors of the Warcraft clan transplanted the artery fruit to Lake Mobius. As for the weird-looking red fruit, in Lin's opinion, it may be the product of secondary development of the Warcraft clan because the artery fruit is too difficult to cultivate. After burning everything about the Warcraft, Reen put the nugget and other valuable items into the storage room, and the two began their exploration journey in the forest. It has to be said that Lean feels that as a gourmet hunter, Menkai's craftsmanship is truly unique. The delicacies she makes are entirely based on her telekinesis ability, which can be said to be a feast for Lean. Looking at the officer who estimated the value of the beasts' corpses, Lean stepped forward and said, "We don't plan to take these beasts back, we'll leave them with you." "Really?" Hearing Lean's words, the officer's eyes lit up and he confirmed again. "Of course it's true. The original purpose of our trip was to investigate the forest ecology. If these ferocious beasts hadn't attacked us, we would never have killed them." Menkai replied to the officer in a positive tone, as if he were a very dedicated forest hunter. "Okay. I'll stop being disrespectful. You are welcome to come to Tommy's forest for investigation next time." The officer nodded to the two of them in a very friendly manner. "Let go." The officer conveyed the order and Lean and Menkai picked up the backpacks on the ground and walked out of the stronghold. The two walked forward for a while, and Reen took out the cell phone that had been turned off from the storage room. After checking the cell phone signal, a call was made. "Hello. Mr. Lean, have you come out of Tommy's forest?" Basso's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Yes, Mr. Basso, I am with a companion and I need you to take us out of the country." Hearing Bazuo's voice again, Lean felt like he was suddenly separated from another world. Even he didn't expect that this trip would take more than 3 months. Basso replied, "Can Mr. Lean go to the place where you disembarked last time? I will send someone to pick you up." "Can." The two hung up the phone after the exchange. Basso could not come in person this time because he had other tasks, but he promised that he would arrange for someone to take Lean out of the country. After all, it is difficult to enter the NGL autonomous country, but it is not too complicated to get out, as long as you do not bring contraband. "Let's go, Menkai." "Okay." Menkai agreed and followed Lean towards the place where Lean got off the boat. I took a look at the missed calls on my phone. There were calls from Young, Bisji, and Jin. The most numerous ones were from Ford. Without any hesitation, Lean directly responded to Ford's call. After all, he had agreed with Ford that it was just a trip, but he didn't expect that nearly half a year had passed. "Mr. Lean, where have you been during this time? I thought something happened to you." The moment the call was connected, Ford's excited voice came over the phone. Lean gave a helpless smile. Ford was right. He did encounter many things, but these things were obviously not suitable to be told to Ford. He simply informed Ford that he was safe and explained that he would return to the company to find him after a while, which made Ford feel at ease. "By the way, you told me before to collect information about the Collier family. I have already collected it. You can read it when you come back." After listening to Ford's words, Lean simply replied and hung up the phone. After taking a look at the remaining missed calls, Lean called Biscay this time. Unexpectedly, Biscay's phone turned off. Lean, who eliminated Biscay as an option, called Yungu directly. This time the call was answered decisively, and Yungu told Lean that the hunter exam was about to start, and asked Lean not to forget to sign up. President Nitro specifically asked Lean to take this exam. After telling Yungu about Bisji's inability to contact him, Lean realized that what Bisji wanted to say and what Yungu told him were the same thing. After ending the call with Yungu, Lean called Jin this time, but the line on the other side of the phone was always busy. Lean knew without thinking that this guy Jin must be dealing with something. All he had to do was wait for his call. After all, this guy was the type who would go to the Three Treasures Palace for nothing. Seeing Lean finish the phone call, Menkai joked, "It seems you have a lot of friends." Hearing this, Lean shrugged helplessly and said, "Except for a few people, they are all guys who love to cause trouble. I'm going back to the Sky Arena, what about you? Where are you going?" Looking at Menkai walking beside him, Lean felt a little reluctant to leave for some reason. Menkai thought for a moment and said slowly, "I'm going to the Hunter Association. I harvested a lot of unexplored ingredients this time. I need to report my merits." "Okay, if you have any questions, call me." Lean agreed, knowing that this separation was already doomed from the moment he left Tommy's forest. As if sensing Lean's mood, Menkai comforted him, "Don't worry, I will come to you when I'm bored." The two walked and chatted, seeming to cherish the time before they parted. When the two of them walked to the river, the yacht that Lin took last time was already waiting there. After the staff on the yacht confirmed their identities, they respectfully invited them onto the yacht. However, when leading the two of them into their respective rooms, Menkai chose to stay in the same room as Lin. Naturally, his purpose was not revealed. Unfortunately, happy times are always short-lived. After a period of sailing, the two of them arrived at the airship airport of the NGL Autonomous Country under the guidance of Basso's people. After buying a ticket to the Republic of Bartokia, Lin couldn't help but sigh. The ticket price was still as expensive as chartering an airship. Waving goodbye to Menkai, each of them boarded the airship flying to the two destinations with a parting mood. Chapter 74. After several days of sailing, Rin finally made a new breakthrough in learning the divine words before arriving at the Republic of Bartokia. Words like divine characters are difficult at first and then easier. The more you accumulate, the faster you will learn them. According to Jin's standards for divine characters are roughly divided into 3 stages. The first stage is to understand and be able to simply engrave the divine characters. The second stage is to integrate the 189 basic divine characters and become the basis for entering the third stage. In the third stage, 189 basic divine characters can be used to inscribe compound divine characters representing different meanings. As for whether there will be other stages after that, Lin doesn't know. He guesses that Jin should be in the third stage and has gone very far in this stage. As for Lin himself, he is still some distance away from the third stage. The second stage has just been completed, and his understanding of the compound divine characters is not deep. Following the flow of people out of the airport and watching the endless flow of people, Lin, who had spent more than 3 months in the forest, felt very comfortable and felt the smell of fireworks in the world. At the airport exit, Lin took a taxi and went straight to the company he opened with Ford. When he saw Ford again, it was just as Lin thought. Ford really couldn't recognize himself now. After all, the difference in appearance, height, and voice was too big compared to before. After spending a lot of words, Lin proved his identity to Ford by telling what happened between the two, and Ford believed him with disbelief. Ford, I'll use the company's warehouse and I'll ask you to handle something later. Before leaving Ford's office, Lin left a few words and went directly to the company's warehouse. When Lin came to the warehouse, he saw that the huge warehouse only occupied a small part of the supplies. He smiled and thought to himself, I don't know what kind of impact these useless ingredients I have on the market will have on the market. Taking out the items from the storage room, Rin divided them into 2 parts and placed them in the warehouse. Some of them were ingredients that Menkai needed. In order to pass the inspection of the NGL Autonomous Country, Lin kept all the items and prepared to hand them to Menkai by mail after leaving. The other part is the ingredients that Lin can't use. Lin plans to sell these ingredients directly to Ford. After all, mosquitoes are still meat no matter how small they are. Until Lin informed Ford to come to the warehouse, Ford's eyes widened, looking at the mountain of supplies in front of him, his expression full of disbelief. Ford, you can sell these things according to the standards of A-grade ingredients. In addition, help me prepare some high-end snacks, daily necessities, and other things in larger quantities. The supplies are almost consumed during this trip and need to be replenished. Lin patted Ford on the shoulder, left the somewhat dazed Ford in the warehouse, and came to Ford's office. After taking a look at the computer on his desk, he found that the computer was not locked by a password, and he immediately began to operate it. There are 2 ways to take the professional hunter exam in Hunter World. One is to submit a registration card to the local recruitment office, and the other is to register online. No matter which one you use, the 2 methods are the same. They are just registration methods adapted to suit people in different regions. After filling in all the information and checking it to make sure it was correct, Lin moved the mouse and clicked submit. The page began to refresh, prompting Rin to successfully register for the 287th Professional Hunter Examination. The exam location is located on the continent of Yubyuan, and the specific location will be sent via email and text message. After closing the page on the computer, Lin picked up the file bag on the table and read it. This was Ford's collection of information on the Collier family. After looking through it roughly, Lin thought to himself, sure enough, what was collected was only some basic information, and there was almost no information about people with telekinesis abilities. He didn't care about the information. With Lin's current understanding of his own strength, there was no chance that the Collier family would survive when the hunter exam was over. Just to be on the safe side, let the Dumian people search for some information when the time comes. It's mainly information about people with telekinesis abilities. After all, the Hunter Association owes Lean a lot of favors, so he won't have any burden in using them. After taking a look at the clock hanging on the wall, Lean planned to go out for a meal first, then buy some high-end goods, and go visit Yungu and his cheap apprentice Hwashi Dolang. As for his cheap disciple Hanashi Doru, Lean only took him into Shinzanryu with the mentality of giving him a hand, but he didn't have time to teach him, so he always left it to Yungu to help him practice. This was nothing to Yungu. He was going to take GXI to practice. It would also be good for GXI to practice with an extra martial arts master. After all, Lean also gave him a lot of money. Carrying a bunch of high-end gifts, Lean knocked on the door of Jung's bachelor apartment. However, to Lean's surprise, it was not Yungu who opened the door, but his disciple GXI. "Who are you looking for?" Zhixi looked at the strange young man in front of her and asked. "I'm Lean, long time no see Chahi." Lean fully understood this situation, but he couldn't help but spend a lot of time proving his identity. After some explanations, Zhixi finally confirmed Lean's identity, but this also made Lean feel a little tired. Glancing inside the door, Lean asked Zhixi, "Is Yungu at home?" Zhixi scratched his head and said, "Yungu Normal School and Hwashi Dolang went out, as if they were going to do something." Knowing that Yungu was not here, Lean handed the gift in his hand to GXI and told him, "Tell Yungu and Hwashi Dolang that I have been here, inform them of my current situation, and come visit again when you have time." After saying that, Lean left Jung's bachelor's apartment. As Lean walked on the street, in addition to handing over the large batch of supplies Ford had purchased, he was also going to buy some daily supplies for himself and put them in the storage room for later use, and then walk towards the commercial center. After buying all kinds of items, Lean stayed in the company for a few days. After Ford had settled the matter, he was ready to go out for a simple trip before the Hunter exam. But what Lean didn't expect was that when the supplies arrived, it was already December 1998, 12. There are still 13 days until the official professional hunter examination on January 7, 1999. During these 13 days, Ryan must rush to the examination location on the continent of Ubilua. So Lean's travel plan basically came to nothing. After all, it would take 10 days to get to the Ubiluan continent from the Republic of Bartokya, not including the time to get to the destination. After putting the supplies into the storage room, Lean simply said goodbye to Ford, turned around and walked towards the airship airport. After buying an airship ticket to the Ubiluan continent, Lean officially began his journey to take the professional hunter exam. On January 1999, 1, Lean received a notification text message from the Hunters Association. The text message informed, candidates taking the Hunter professional examination are requested to arrive at the port of Dali Island before January 1999, 1 to take the 7th professional hunter examination. Looking at the text message on his phone, Lean revealed a smile and murmured, "The 287th professional hunter exam." The plot is about to begin. Chapter 75. January 199, 1 in the Hunter calendar, port of Dali Island. Phew. I'm here, but I didn't expect to miss the ferry. Fortunately, I can charter a boat, otherwise I really wouldn't be able to catch it. There were not many people in the port at this time, and Lean knew that this was because the candidates for the hunter exam had already started taking the exam leading to the venue. Looking at the huge cedar tree on the mountain in the distance, Lean, who was familiar with the plot, knew that as long as he walked in this direction, he could follow the path of the protagonist group in the original work to the next examination location. In the original work, the route chosen by Gon, Kurapika, Leorio, and others was not an easy one, but the captain was kind enough to tell them a less dangerous route. This hunter exam can be said to have turned the entire town of Dali Island into an exam venue. There is more than one way to the exam venue, but the dangers faced are different. Lean, who was familiar with the plot, was already a little late, so naturally he would not explore new routes. As long as he followed the route of the protagonist group, he could easily reach the venue. As for going directly to the examination venue in Barcelona City, Lean has not considered it at all, because going directly to the venue is not even qualified to take the exam, because no one will give Lean a number plate. Unless Lean directly grabs one, but if he has the time, he might as well take a step-by-step exam. He just takes this opportunity to see if he can get in touch with the protagonist group. Looks like I'm late for a long time, I have to hurry up. After calculating the time in his mind, Lin walked towards the huge cedar tree. However, what puzzles Lin is that according to the plot, there are many ferocious beasts on the straight road leading to the giant cedar tree, and some special roads even have monsters. But Lin obviously walked a straight distance, so he couldn't see a single candidate, so he didn't even see a rabbit. Although he had some doubts, Lin was just doubtful. With his strength, it could be said that there was nothing that could threaten him on this island. Along the way, Lin gradually accelerated his pace until he entered a dilapidated-looking village. There are many children in the village wearing sheets and masks on their heads, appearing mysteriously and telling brain teasers. Looking at this situation, Lin knew that this was an exam arranged by the Hunter Association to screen out some candidates. The content of the exam was to answer questions. As they marched along, Lin was surrounded by a large group of people. The leader of this group was an old woman who was just over 1 meter tall. The old woman was holding a crutch with the logo of the Hunters Association, and behind her stood a group of people wearing white robes and strange-looking masks. At this time, Lin's mentality was absolutely relaxed, and he was very curious about what kind of question this old man would give him, and whether it would be different from the question in the original book. "Wait a minute, there are a few people behind you. When they arrive, I will give the questions together." The old woman stacked her crutches and looked in the direction behind Lin. Lin nodded noncommittally. He didn't expect that there was someone behind him. It seemed that he was not the last one. About 2 minutes later, Lin heard footsteps behind him. When he turned around, he saw the protagonist group and others walking over, chatting and laughing. The moment he saw Zijia and others, Lin guessed that because he took a straight path, he was faster than the protagonist group, so they met here. After all, in the original work, because Zijia could smell the scent of ferocious beasts, he did not walk in a straight line, but avoided dangers on the road and arrived here safely. Looking at the protagonist group in front of him, Lin compared it with the image in his memory. The hedgehog head, the blonde Shota, and the young uncle were exactly the same as in his memory. Except for the missing silver-haired killer, the young master who beat up the enemy Haka, the team is basically complete. When Lin looked at Zijia and the other three, Zijia and the other three were also looking at Lin, curious about the white-haired young man staying here. "Everyone is here. You must be the last group of people. Let's start the test." The voice of the examiner's old lady attracted the attention of Zijia and others. Especially Karapika, when he saw the mark on the cane, he immediately understood that this old woman was the examiner of the hunter exam. Under the watchful eyes of several people, the old woman asked a question: "Both your son and daughter were taken away, and you can only save one. Which one will you choose to save?" Hearing the old woman's question, Lin thought to himself, sure enough, it's the same tricky question as the original. As the question appeared, everyone present fell into silence. Only Leorio stepped forward and shouted, "Why should I answer your question? I am going to the exam venue now and will not stay here." Seeing Lin like this, he couldn't help but smile to himself, sure enough, this is a person who doesn't have much scheming, and is so rough even if he makes excuses. "Leori, look at his cane. It has the logo of the Hunters Association on it. If you refuse to answer, we will most likely lose our qualifications." Karapika told Leorio his thoughts and hoped that Leorio would cooperate as much as possible. Hearing Karapika's words, Leorio gritted his teeth and retreated, but it was easy to see from his expression that asking him to answer this question was more uncomfortable than killing him. Lin stood aside and watched this scene with interest. Having read the original work, he basically understands the characters of these people, but participating and watching are two completely different feelings. Unlike Karapika, who already has the answer in his mind, Gon is really thinking about this question seriously, but it is obvious that with his experience, he cannot answer the answer in his heart. Seeing this situation, Lin decided to teach these people a lesson. After all, he would definitely come into contact with these people in the future. "Guys, my name is Lin. If you believe me, I will answer this question for you. How about it?" After hearing Lin's words, several people had different reactions, especially Leorio, who shouted, "Who are you? Why should you answer on our behalf?" Zijia on the side looked at Lin curiously and asked, "Lin, do you really know the answer?" Smiling and nodding, Rin looked at Karapika and asked, "Maybe the so-called silence is the correct answer, but maybe there is a better answer. I think you will be satisfied." "Hey, why are you talking so loudly here? You!" Before Leorio could finish speaking, he was pulled aside by Karapika. I think it's okay. This big brother didn't lie to us. Gon's tone was full of affirmation, and Karapika on the side was also aroused by Lean's words. Okay. No problem, I'm also curious what your answer is. Chapter 76. Lean was not surprised when he heard Karapika's reply. He knew that Karapika was a person with a strong thirst for knowledge. But because of his hatred against the Phantom Troop, this optimistic young man was burdened with the burden of revenge for the Koluta clan. Reen looked at Leorio and asked, Big little brother, what about you? Do you want to know the answer? Leorio, who was standing behind Karapika, did not answer Lean's question and roared, You just wanted to call me uncle, right? I'm only 19 years old, but I'm just a little more mature in appearance, you bastard. Cough. Cough. Slip of the tongue, what's your opinion? Lean coughed twice. When he saw Leorio's appearance just now, he almost forgot that this guy was only 19 years old. Looking at Gon and Karapika beside him, Leorio said helplessly, It's up to you. I don't care if I fail. Leorio gave the answer, and Lean looked at the old examiner and said, They agree that I am plenipotentiary, is that okay? Please say. After receiving an acceptable answer, Lean looked at the old examiner and replied, Of course my son and daughter were all saved. Hearing this answer, the old woman who was the examiner said angrily, I told you, I can only save one. Is there something wrong with your brain? Seeing the angry old woman, Lean smiled slightly and said, Don't be angry. Being angry is not good for the elderly. Then, Lean turned his head to look at the people behind him and asked, Do you think there is something wrong with my answer? Zyja, no problem. Karapika, no problem. Leorio. After getting the answers from the three people, Lean turned his head and said, Look, my answer is correct. At this time, the examiner's mother-in-law felt that Lean and the others were teasing her, and shouted angrily, What do you think of the hunter exam? Are you kids playing house? I now judge that you have lost the qualification to take the exam. Ah! I really can't believe him. I can tell as soon as I look at this guy that he is definitely not a good person. Before Lean could say anything, Leorio's yelling voice could be heard in his ears. Leoli! Calm down. It's not over yet. Seeing Leorio like this, Karapika shouted angrily and forcibly interrupted Leorio's frustrated speech. Seeing this scene, Lean wanted to laugh a little, but there was no lack of appreciation for Leorio in his eyes. Leorio's behavior is obviously that this guy is too simple, so simple that many things are expressed openly. In Lean's opinion, people with this kind of personality are very suitable to be friends and will not have any bad intentions. Sure enough, Karapika's shock and anger still had an effect. Leorio remained silent after hearing the words, just gritted his teeth and looked in Lean's direction. Reason? What's the reason for your answer? Karapika didn't believe that Lean's answer was just like this. There must be some deeper reason. Ignoring everyone's doubts, Lean said to himself, You can pass the test by choosing silence, but is this answer really what you want? Reen's words attracted the attention of everyone present, and even Leorio, who was gritting his teeth on the side, began to think deeply. What is a professional hunter? A professional hunter is a profession that pursues a goal and constantly strives for it. Then Lean smiled mysteriously and said to the examiner's mother-in-law, A hunter who is bound in a framework is just a bird trapped in a cage of rules, and can never be called a profession. Only those who break the rules and find their own path can be called professional hunters. Lean's words caused everyone present to think deeply. Unexpectedly, Lean wanted to break the rules. Choosing the option of silence is obviously a sign of incompetence. Don't say you don't know how to choose. In fact, the answer has always been right in front of you. What's the answer? To Lean's surprise, the person who asked the question was not the three protagonists, but the old examiner on the side. The question of the examiner's wife obviously represented the voice of everyone present, and everyone's eyes were focused on Lean. Reen smiled confidently and explained, Of course, becoming a professional hunter and gaining the power to break the rules. After Lean finished speaking, everyone fell silent again, obviously thinking about the meaning of these words. Hey! Now, does Brother Lean have the power to break all rules? Zyja's voice came, and Lean turned to look, nodded affirmatively, and said softly, I am also on the road to breaking the rules. As for you, you still have unlimited possibilities in the future. Zyja nodded in understanding, lowered his head and pondered, wondering what he was thinking about. How about it, Mr. Examiner, do you still want to disqualify us? Lin turned to look at the examiner's old lady, and the energy in his body radiated towards the examiner. You passed the test. Feeling the rush of thought energy, the examiner also sensed Lin's strong strength, with a look of surprise on his face. Seeing Lin, who was so young and had such a deep understanding of hunters, the old lady examiner murmured, "Is this your power to break the rules? You are such an incredible young man." After hearing the passing reply, Lin turned to look at the protagonist group. "Look. I said it's no problem. Follow this shortcut and you will approach the examination venue faster." The old woman who was the examiner pointed at the opened passage and showed Linji the way. "Let's go to the next exam location." After urging a few people, Lin walked into the passage first. Hey! How do you know that old woman who is the examiner is pointing us in the right direction?" Leorio behind him asked loudly, not avoiding the examiner who had not gone far. Karapika was speechless and explained, "The other party has no reason to lie to us at all, and didn't you notice the beast's roar coming from the mountains before? Yeah, it smells like ferocious beasts over there, but not at all in this direction." After hearing Karapika's explanation, Gon echoed. "Is that so? I still think this guy named Reen is suspicious." Leorio walked behind, not minding that Lin heard these words. Lin, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped. Seeing this scene, Leorio thought that Lin was about to take action and immediately became alert. That old woman is not an examiner at all, or she should be called a tester. These testers are responsible for screening candidates and directing candidates to the real venue, so there is no need to think that they will harm us. Lin explained to Zyja and others. Karapika responded, "You mean, the real hunter exam hasn't started yet?" "No, it has already started since you signed up, but the real test is yet to come. Otherwise, why do you think that only a handful of people can reach the exam venue when 100 million people take the exam? And very few of this small group of people can become professional hunters." Chapter 77. Lin's words were very straightforward. The purpose was to make a few people pay more attention to the hunter exam. This was to cultivate a few people's vigilance. In his previous life, Lin was very fond of these people in the protagonist group. Gon's innocence, Karapika's calmness and persistence, Leorio's emphasis on relationships, and Killua's desire for freedom and selfless devotion to friends. After listening to Lin's words, several people began to think about it. Seeing this scene, Lin was very satisfied, which proved that several people had begun to get into the rhythm of the exam. The current attention is a good start for their future growth. "Lin, you have so much experience. You have taken several hunter exams?" Zyja asked doubtfully. "Well, it's my first time participating, but I have many professional hunter friends." Lin was a little speechless. After all, it was his first time to tell people some rules, which was a bit untenable in terms of weight. Lin is indeed a very powerful person, but do you know Jin Fulasi? "He is my father." Zyja asked Lin excitedly, his eyes full of expectation. I know him, but I can't reveal any information about him, and I don't know where he is now." Seeing Zyja's expectant eyes, Lin thought carefully. Since it was Jin's trouble, he should leave this problem to Jin. "Is that so? But I will find him." After listening to Lin's words, Zyja felt a little lonely for a moment, but regained his fighting spirit in the blink of an eye. Seeing Zyja in this state, Lin comforted him, "Although I can't tell you many things about him, your father, Jin Fulis, is a great hunter, the best teammate, and the most knowledgeable expert. The most difficult friend to get along with." Listening to Lin's words, Zyja's eyes flashed. This was the first time he heard someone other than Aunt Mit talk about their views on Jin. "Hey, Lin, why is Jin the most difficult friend to get along with?" Zyja asked with excitement. The corner of Lin's mouth twitched, as if he didn't want to answer the question, but he still couldn't stand Zyja's gaze and explained, "Because it is easy to have no secrets when you are friends with such a fox-like person." Zyja murmured to himself, "That's right. Sure enough, Jin is a very smart person, just like a fox." Hearing Zyja's muttering to himself, Lin thought to himself, "The fox must be cunning." Ignoring Gon, Reen said to Karapika and Leorio, "Let's keep going. There are many tests waiting for us below." After a while of Lin's persuasion, everyone, who was not very vigilant at first, began to become nervous again. After all, everyone who takes the hunter exam has their own purpose. As for the protagonist group, except for Killua, who just beats up enemies for fun, the rest of them all have reasons to become professional hunters. Everyone was walking along, and unlike before where they were chatting and laughing, even Leorio began to notice the differences around him, but compared to the other two, he was quite suspicious. The sky was getting gloomy, and Lin and others were walking on the rugged mountain road. Various prompts and buildings appeared from time to time around them. Although Lin didn't recognize them, he knew that they were about to reach the level of the vicious fox. This level is not difficult for Lin at all, but it is a rare experience for the protagonist group. He is not prepared to ruin this test, and pretending not to know that waiting for the changes is the best option. Walking on the rugged mountain road, Kurapika's expression became more solemn as he walked, as if he had discovered something from the surrounding environment. "Look, Lin, it says beware of monsters." Zyja, who was walking behind Lin, pointed at the sign on the roadside and said. Lin nodded and encouraged, "Then I'll leave it to you. If we smell the scent of a monster, we'll take a detour." "Well, leave it to me," Zyja said excitedly. Seeing Zyja in this state, Lin knew that it was because he had lived on Whale Island for a long time, and Zyja had a strong sense of novelty towards various things in the outside world. As Lin and the others gradually moved forward, the sky became darker and darker, the thick fog in the mountains gradually rose, and the surrounding vision began to become blurry. Walking to a lake, Rin and the others boarded a wooden boat in the water, with Kurapika and Leorio rowing the boat. Rin and Gon were alert to the surrounding situation, and finally managed to get ashore without incident. As we walked along the road, we saw more and more "Beware of Monsters" signs around. Lin knew that these were placed by the monsters living here to prevent humans from approaching here. There are more and more notice boards around Rin. Is there really a monster coming out? Leorio looked around suspiciously and asked nervously. Lin glanced at Zyja, and Zyja shook his head, indicating that Lin did not smell the scent of the monster. "G didn't smell the scent of the monster, don't be too nervous, Leorio." Just as Lin signaled Leorio not to be nervous, a roar came from the tree behind them, startling everyone except Lin. "Who is it?" Leorio was frightened, and looked behind him following everyone's gaze. He saw a humanoid, fox-like beast with blood-red eyes open and roaring. Lin was a little surprised by the fox's behavior. He had discovered this monster a long time ago and just pretended not to know. At the same time, Lin also understood that because these monsters had lived in the human world for a long time, they were contaminated with human aura. If they were far away, Zyja would not be able to detect them at all. According to the plot, this monster should be preparing to perform in a cabin under a giant cedar tree. What is the situation now exposed? In Lin's puzzled eyes, several black shadows quickly jumped out from the distance and merged with the monster on the tree. The protagonist group had never seen this situation before, so they all took out their weapons and prepared for battle. Several monsters said something unknown on the tree, but as they communicated, they would look in Lin's direction with their scarlet eyes from time to time. This made Lin, who was familiar with the plot, a little confused. He couldn't help but secretly wonder if his appearance disrupted the plot, but he did nothing. Humans, die! Warcraft took the lead in launching an attack, and the target of the attack was Lin, who looked confused. Stand back, their target is me. Although I don't know why, I am not a soft persimmon. After dodging the sharp claws of the monster, Lin asked Zyja and others to leave the battlefield. Seeing this situation, Zyja and the others backed away. From the perspective of the protagonist group, since Lin didn't need their help, it meant that Lin had a way to deal with the situation at hand. Chapter 78. Seeing Zyja and others obediently retreating, Lin looked at the monsters surrounding him with a hint of disdain in his eyes. No matter when or where, Lin always holds the thought when dealing with foreign races, that those who are not of my race must have different intentions. Now it's just that humans are powerful and occupy part of the living space of Warcraft. If one day the monsters become more powerful, Lin can be sure that the first ones to attack humans will be those monsters that originally claimed to coexist with humans. Cunning is the nature of Warcraft, there is absolutely no doubt about this, so Lin will never show mercy to these Warcraft. The sharp claws shone with a cold light. Looking at the approaching monster, Lin flashed his figure, dodged the monster's attack, and kicked him out with a powerful kick. In the surprised eyes of Zyja and others, Lin summoned Wu Sheng and slashed out with his backhand, and a sword light streaked across the night sky. The monsters fled in all directions. The monster kicked away by Lin was also carried away by the other monsters. The sword light fell into the air and chopped off countless big trees before slowly dissipating. The Warcraft had never seen such a scene before. They looked at Lin in shock and did not dare to act rashly. It's amazing. This is definitely not magic. Is this the power of breaking the rules that Lin said? Gon's eyes were full of anticipation and his tone was very excited, while Kurapika on the side saw this scene, and the desire for revenge was constantly emerging in his mind. This kind of power, as long as it can be learned, can definitely avenge the dead clan members. Desire was like a seed, taking root in Kurapika's heart, and the fiery red in his eyes gradually emerged. Hey! Hey! Have you seen it? This is really something that people can use. Lin slash just flew out. Is this really an illusion? The three people present each have their own ideas, but for them, there is still a long way to go. After helping the injured monster, one of the tall monsters looked in the direction of Lin and said, "You strong human beings, why are you killing monsters? The bloody smell of monsters on your body can no longer be achieved by killing one or two." To the extent. Seeing the power of Lin slash, with the cunning mind of Warcraft, he knew in his heart that this person was definitely invincible, and he just launched the attack out of hatred and instinct. Looking at the four monsters in front of him calmly, the murderous intention in Lin's heart began to boil, and he thought to himself, it turns out that the smell of killing monsters will remain on the body. Kill. Without saying too many words, Lin held Wu Sheng and rushed towards the monster. With the blessing of his thoughts, his body almost emerged from the afterimage. Seeing Lin charging towards them, several monsters had no time to react. Unexpectedly, the other party gave up the opportunity to communicate. Seeing Lin rushing towards him, one of the monsters shouted, "I am a candidate for the hunter exam." Before Warcraft had finished speaking, Lin's long knife slashed across, and a fox head rose into the sky. There was no gasp or pause. The true meaning of Yingyu's sword technique was fully displayed in Lin's hands, and each sword was faster than the last. Before the chopped head hit the ground, a bright sword light flashed, and the monster standing next to the headless body had been split into two halves by Lin's sword. Escape. This was the only thought in the minds of the remaining two monsters, but before they could react, Lin threw out a ring of sword light, covering the two monsters in an instant. The moment the sword light passed by, one of the monsters jumped up slightly, but its legs were cut off, while the other one was cut off at the waist. With a gentle breath, Lin slowly walked towards the monster with its legs cut off. Listening to Lin's footsteps and looking at Lin's gradually approaching figure, Warcraft seemed to see the figure of the god of death, and its whole body trembled uncontrollably. What? The monster made a deafening sound, frightening the birds in the forest and breaking the silence in the forest. The howl of a defeated dog? If I remember correctly, it was you who attracted your companions to attack me. Holding Wushan in hand, Lin walked up to the monster with a hint of coldness in his eyes. Originally, Lin didn't have the slightest fondness for creatures like Warcraft. Coupled with what happened just now, he saw the nature of this creature even more clearly. Knowing clearly that Lin was a candidate, and without any enmity between the two parties, he used his breath to attack Lin. If you can beat Lin, Nan will die in vain. Anyway, he is just a candidate. When he couldn't defeat Lin, he cunningly revealed his identity as the hunter test examiner and tried to threaten him to stop. However, these monsters made a mistake. Even if Rin did not take the hunter exam, I am afraid Nitro would not allow it. After all, the identity of Lin's Hunter Association's exclusive psychic master is there. To put it bluntly, a phone call to the Hunter Association because Lin postponed the exam is not impossible. You can go and die, and the family will be in order. It will never be complete without you. Hearing Lin's words, the monster trembled even more violently, and even some of the down on its body fell off. It tried desperately to stir up the soil, trying to make a final struggle. SHH. With one strike of the knife, the monster family of the huge cedar tree was destroyed. Wow, Lin, you are so awesome. Xiaoju ran out excitedly, not feeling scared at all when faced with the bloody scene just now. Kurapika and Leorio followed. Just when Kurapika was about to say something, Rin stopped them. The long knife in his hand turned slightly, and a blade of light flew out, aiming at the jungle on Lin's left side. SHH. A figure jumped out and landed in front of Lin and others. This person was wearing a forest ranger's clothes. After landing, he quickly raised his hands to indicate that he had no intention of attacking. Seeing the person coming, Lin had roughly guessed the person's identity and asked, "Are you a tester who screens candidates?" "Yes, I am the ranger of this forest and the test officer responsible for testing candidates. I also hired the fierce fox family." The ranger didn't hide anything at all and told all his details. Looking at the test officer in front of him, Lin raised his hand and asked, "Are you ready to avenge these monsters?" These words completely frightened the ranger. In his opinion, the vicious fox family deserved to die, and they would be killed if they took action. "No. No. I was just observing the candidates. Now that you have passed the examination, I can take you to the examination venue." The ranger test officer waved his hands repeatedly, hurriedly dissociating himself from the fierce fox family, and announced that Lin and others had passed the test. Lin put Wu Sheng away. In fact, he had discovered the existence of this person a long time ago, but he just didn't reveal it. Lin had no doubts about the identity of this tester. After all, it was obviously the most unreasonable thing to use a warcraft as a tester for an exam set by humans. Chapter 79. Seeing Zijia and others obediently retreating, Lin looked at the monsters surrounding him with a hint of disdain in his eyes. No matter when or where, Lin always holds the thought when dealing with foreign races, that those who are not of my race must have different intentions. Now it's just that humans are powerful and occupy part of the living space of Warcraft. If one day the monsters become more powerful, Lin can be sure that the first ones to attack humans will be those monsters that originally claimed to coexist with humans. Cunning is the nature of Warcraft, there is absolutely no doubt about this, so Lin will never show mercy to these Warcraft. The sharp claws shone with a cold light. Looking at the approaching monster, Lin flashed his figure, dodged the monster's attack, and kicked him out with a powerful kick. In the surprised eyes of Zijia and others, Lin summoned Wu Sheng and slashed out with his backhand, and a sword light streaked across the night sky. The monsters fled in all directions. The monster kicked away by Lin was also carried away by the other monsters. The sword light fell into the air and chopped off countless big trees before slowly dissipating. The Warcraft had never seen such a scene before. They looked at Lin in shock and did not dare to act rashly. "It's amazing. This is definitely not magic. Is this the power of breaking the rules that Lin said?" Gon's eyes were full of anticipation and his tone was very excited, while Karapika on the side saw this scene, and the desire for revenge was constantly emerging in his mind. This kind of power, as long as it can be learned, can definitely avenge the dead clan members. Desire was like a seed, taking root in Karapika's heart, and the fiery red in his eyes gradually emerged. "Hey! Hey! Have you seen it? This is really something that people can use." Lin slash just flew out. "Is this really an illusion?" The three people present each have their own ideas, but for them, there is still a long way to go. After helping the injured monster, one of the tall monsters looked in the direction of Lin and said, "You strong human beings, why are you killing monsters? The bloody smell of monsters on your body can no longer be achieved by killing one or two." To the extent. Seeing the power of Lin slash, with the cunning mind of Warcraft, he knew in his heart that this person was definitely invincible, and he just launched the attack out of hatred and instinct. Looking at the four monsters in front of him calmly, the murderous intention in Lin's heart began to boil, and he thought to himself, it turns out that the smell of killing monsters will remain on the body. Kill. Without saying too many words, Lin held Wu Sheng and rushed towards the monster. With the blessing of his thoughts, his body almost emerged from the afterimage. Seeing Lin charging towards them, several monsters had no time to react. Unexpectedly, the other party gave up the opportunity to communicate. Seeing Lin rushing towards him, one of the monsters shouted, "I am a candidate for the hunter exam." Before Warcraft had finished speaking, Lin's long knife slashed across, and a fox head rose into the sky. There was no gasp or pause. The true meaning of Yingyu's sword technique was fully displayed in Lin's hands, and each sword was faster than the last. Before the chopped head hit the ground, a bright sword light flashed, and the monster standing next to the headless body had been split into two halves by Lin's sword. Escape. This was the only thought in the minds of the remaining two monsters, but before they could react, Lin threw out a ring of sword light, covering the two monsters in an instant. The moment the sword light passed by, one of the monsters jumped up slightly, but its legs were cut off, while the other one was cut off at the waist. With a gentle breath, Lin slowly walked towards the monster with its legs cut off. Listening to Lin's footsteps and looking at Lin's gradually approaching figure, Warcraft seemed to see the figure of the god of death, and its whole body trembled uncontrollably. What? The monster made a deafening sound, frightening the birds in the forest and breaking the silence in the forest. The howl of a defeated dog? If I remember correctly, it was you who attracted your companions to attack me. Holding Wuxian in hand, Lin walked up to the monster with a hint of coldness in his eyes. Originally, Lin didn't have the slightest fondness for creatures like Warcraft. Coupled with what happened just now, he saw the nature of this creature even more clearly. Knowing clearly that Lin was a candidate, and without any enmity between the two parties, he used his breath to attack Lin. If you can beat Lin, Nan will die in vain. Anyway, he is just a candidate. When he couldn't defeat Lin, he cunningly revealed his identity as the hunter test examiner and tried to threaten him to stop. However, these monsters made a mistake. Even if Rin did not take the hunter exam, I am afraid Nitro would not allow it. After all, the identity of Lin's Hunter Association's exclusive psychic master is there. To put it bluntly, a phone call to the Hunter Association because Lin postponed the exam is not impossible. You can go and die, and the family will be in order. It will never be complete without you. Hearing Lin's words, the monster trembled even more violently, and even some of the down on its body fell off. It tried desperately to stir up the soil, trying to make a final struggle. SHH. With one strike of the knife, the monster family of the huge cedar tree was destroyed. Wow, Lin, you are so awesome. Xiaoju ran out excitedly, not feeling scared at all when faced with the bloody scene just now. Kurapika and Leorio followed. Just when Kurapika was about to say something, Rin stopped them. The long knife in his hand turned slightly, and a blade of light flew out, aiming at the jungle on Lin's left side. SHH. A figure jumped out and landed in front of Lin and others. This person was wearing a forest ranger's clothes. After landing, he quickly raised his hands to indicate that he had no intention of attacking. Seeing the person coming, Lin had roughly guessed the person's identity and asked, "Are you a tester who screens candidates?" "Yes, I am the ranger of this forest and the test officer responsible for testing candidates. I also hired the Fierce Fox family." The ranger didn't hide anything at all and told all his details. Looking at the test officer in front of him, Lin raised his hand and asked, "Are you ready to avenge these monsters?" These words completely frightened the ranger. In his opinion, the vicious Fox family deserved to die, and they would be killed if they took action. "No. No. I was just observing the candidates. Now that you have passed the examination, I can take you to the examination venue." The ranger test officer waved his hands repeatedly, hurriedly dissociating himself from the Fierce Fox family, and announced that Lin and others had passed the test. Lin put Wu Shang away. In fact, he had discovered the existence of this person a long time ago, but he just didn't reveal it. Lin had no doubts about the identity of this tester. After all, it was obviously the most unreasonable thing to use a Warcraft as a tester for an exam set by humans. Chapter 80. Leorio looked around and hesitated. How about eating a little? After all, taking the exam on an empty stomach will inevitably affect your state. Kurapika nodded and walked over, sitting next to Rin. Seeing this, Xiaoju and Leorio also sat down at the dining table. The ranger on the side shrugged helplessly. In fact, he didn't eat either, but he didn't expect these people to be so ambitious. They were still thinking about eating even though the exam was about to take place. Walking to the dining table, the ranger sat down and said helplessly, "Eat as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will be late." Lin said to the steak shop owner, 5-minute rare steak set meal, as soon as possible. Seeing Lin start to order, Xiaoju and others also ordered a steak set meal. "Okay, some guests, please wait a moment. They'll be ready soon." The shop owner responded and started working quickly. Kurapika sat next to Lin and whispered, "I hope to learn that ability from you as soon as possible. I have a last resort." Of course, Lin knew what Kurapika meant. Revenge for the Kuruta tribe and collecting the eyes of his companions had become Kurapika's lifelong obsession. Even the telekinesis ability developed by Kurapika in the original work has completely abandoned its own existence and become a tool for revenge. Lin was thinking, while Kurapika on the side looked a little anxious and continued, "I am a member of the Koluta tribe. All my people were killed by the Phantom Troop. They were tortured before they died. The purpose was to be praised. Fiery red eyes, one of the 7 beauties." Hearing this, Lin looked at Kurapika and found a hint of crimson beneath his lowered head. "My people were deprived of their eyes under endless pain. In order to avenge my people and take back the eyes of my companions, I will pay any price, even my life. Kurapika's voice became deeper and deeper as he spoke, and at the same time, Lin knew that he was suppressing his own painful memories. Glancing at Gon, who didn't know what he was talking to Leorio, Lin whispered, I can't promise you anything, but I will help you. Lin was not sure whether Kurapika would become a chain killer under his intervention, but Lin knew that because of the prison, the phantom troop was naturally on his opposite side. Giving Kurapika reassurance not only reassures him, but also shows that the two of them have a common goal. Time passed by, and the steak set was quickly delivered to the table. Lin was also curious about the craftsmanship of the owner of the shop that was selected by the Hunter Association. After eating a piece of steak in one bite, Lin felt that the boss's craftsmanship was very good, but the quality of the steak was average. But after seeing Zyja and others eating happily, Lin suddenly realized that it was not that the quality of the steak was low, but that his own requirements had become higher. Lin thought about it carefully. Ever since he went to Tommy's forest, he has been focusing on A-grade ingredients. When dealing with more ordinary ingredients, he will definitely be picky about the quality of the ingredients. Fortunately, the boss's cooking skills were pretty good. Even though the ingredients of the steak were mediocre, Lin still ate them one bite at a time. After taking the last bite, Lin put his hand into his pocket to disguise himself, took out a handful of ring nimbus from the storage room, and threw it on the table. Boss! The money for these steaks is kept here. After saying this, Lin picked up the water glass beside the dining table and took a sip. Seeing Lin pay the bill, several people at the table showed embarrassed expressions. After all, Lin had basically brought them here all the way. I didn't expect Lin to be so generous. In fact, Zyja and others didn't understand Lin's financial situation at all. Lin now has no concept of money at all. This is one of the advantages of the hunter world. As long as you have strength, money is really just like paper. Several people speeded up their meals. After all, they had to take the exam soon. If they were late, they would really be doomed. While several people were speeding up to eat, the door of the restaurant was opened, and a tall young man came in and said to the boss, "Boss, leave the bicycle at the door, help me take a look." The boss smiled and agreed, obviously knowing the tall young man. And many more. The tall young man was about to leave when Lin stopped him. When the young man was confused, Lin threw a stack of Baileys over and said calmly, "I bought that bike." The confused young man looked at Lin and then at the stack of ring nimbus in his hand, unable to distinguish the situation for a moment. What? Not enough. Lin's words reminded the young man, who waved his hands repeatedly and said, "Enough. Enough. I can buy several cars." After saying that, the tall young man felt as if he had said something wrong and quickly ran out of the store with the money. Lin felt a little amused by the tall young man's behavior. He turned to look at everyone and found that everyone had finished eating and was looking at him in confusion. Smiling nonchalantly, Lin said softly, "It's time to go take a look at my new bicycle." Pushing their bicycles, Lin and Zyja walked into the empty room. At the door of the room, the ranger handed out number plates to several people. Taking the white number plate, Lin opened it and looked at it. No. 406. After taking a look at the others, Lin said to himself, "Sure enough, there is no change at all from the original. Leorio is number 403. Kurapika is number 404. Zyja is number 405. Looking at the people who had received their number plates, the ranger waved and said, "I wish you good luck in martial arts." After the ranger finished speaking, he closed the door, and the room slowly moved downwards with the sound of gears turning. Pinning the number plate in his hand, Lin looked at Zyja and the others and said, "There's no need for the atmosphere to be so heavy, just let nature take its course." "How can it not be heavy? We don't have such high strength like you." Leorio's voice was a little heavy. He came with the confidence that he would pass, so how could he not be nervous? Gon and Kurapika nodded, obviously agreeing with Leorio's words. In this regard, Lin expressed his helplessness. His original intention was just to adjust the mentality of a few people, but unexpectedly it had the opposite effect. Cough. After coughing slightly, Lin explained, "I am from a special group. I estimate that most of the other candidates are at about the same level as you." "Really?" Zyja said excitedly. Lin smiled and nodded without saying anything else. After all, even if they followed the original plot, these people would pass safely. Ding dong. The room stopped moving, the door slowly opened, and several people slowly walked out. In the underground testing venue, several people slowly appeared, attracting the attention of the people around them. Under the hostile and suspicious eyes of the surrounding people, the protagonists were all on alert. After all, no one knew what would happen on such an occasion.